There was no sensation, no rush of energy, no swelling heat, no ecstatic pulse beneath the skin. Leveling up in magic came with no thunderous boom, only an odd stillness, as if nothing had changed. And yet something had. Li Ming raised his right hand. With a silent command, a pale mist swirled into existence above his palm, rapidly condensing into a 3-foot-long spike of transparent ice. Cold air rippled off its surface, frosting the edges of his sleeve. Incredible, he murmured. Every time he used magic, it felt like wielding the divine. But this skill, ice element control, was in a class of its own. Unlike low-level incantations like Windblade, it allowed for direct, seamless manipulation of ice. No chant, no delay, just thought and creation. He gave a spike a flick. It flew like a bolt, hissing through the air, covering dozens of meters in a blink. It impaled one tree with a dull crack and didn't stop. It pierced a second. Snap! Li Ming snapped his fingers. The ice spike burst apart midair, dissolving into white mist that expanded outward like a living thing. Everything the frost touched, leaves, bark, branches, was instantly frozen. In mere seconds, a chunk of the forest had turned into a glassy sculpture of ice and stillness. The goblins nearby froze, wide-eyed. Though some stood a safe distance away, they could still feel the creeping chill prickling their skin. Gobu Mo and Gobu Gao exchanged looks of awe and reverence. Their leader's power had grown again. Li Ming turned with a satisfied nod. That's more like it. He walked back into the wooden hall, returning moments later with a small travel pack fastened to his waist. Gobu Mo, Gobu Gao continued guarding the tribe. The two goblins nodded at once, standing straighter. Without another word, Li Ming set off. They watched him disappear into the trees, confusion in their eyes. Why does the boss always go alone? Gobu Mo muttered. He could just leave it all to us, Gobu Gao added. We'd follow him anywhere. But Li Ming didn't explain himself. Not to them. Not to anyone. Half an hour later, north bank of the Goblin River. Li Ming stepped out from the forest, leaves brushing past his shoulders as he approached the wide river. He stood still for a moment, staring at the sunlit waters. Then he grinned. Freeze! Crack! White mist exploded from his feet, racing out over the water like a stampede of spectral horses. In seconds, a 10-meter-wide ice path stretched across the river's surface, glistening in the light. He felt a drain in his body, a subtle tug. Is this what it feels like to burn through magic power? He wondered. The thought passed unbothered. He stepped forward onto the frozen trail, crossing the vast river with steady strides. Principality of Illicis, Borderlands, Goblin Forest. The Goblin River twisted through the rugged highlands like a silver serpent. It was July, the peak of summer. Heat shimmered over the water surface. A small wooden boat made its way upstream, paddled by 5 passengers. The craft was no more than 10 meters long, barely big enough for all of them. 2 of the men were armored, weapons glinting in the sun. Swords, axes, and shields filled the gaps between crates. A third figure wore leather armor, hood up, a bow resting across his knees. 2 women sat near the center, one robed in white, the other in black. Blue crystal-embedded staffs lay beside them. It's way too hot. Odyssey, this is the route you chose, the girl in white grumbled. Sweat clung to her skin, hair plastered to her neck. She glared at the man steering the boat. Odyssey scratched his head sheepishly at the stern. Come on, Martha Eileen. The river route is the fastest and safest. You'd be even more exhausted if we'd gone by land. It'd take twice as long. The girl shot him identical death stares. Beside them, Patience and Rachel rode in silence, faces flushed from exertion. If I'd known, I would have rented an airship from the Crystal Temple, Eileen muttered. And I would have laughed, Odyssey said with a shrug. None of us has that kind of coin. All 4 turned their heads slowly toward him, glaring. The reason for their lack of coin was also rowing right now. Sorry, Odyssey offered with a weak grin. Silence followed, broken only by the rhythmic splash of oars. Then Rachel spoke, his voice low. Captain, all the money you donated? It won't reach those children. The words made Odyssey frown. What are you talking about? Rachel didn't meet his gaze. He hesitated, then spoke. I've been a mercenary for years. I've seen things you wouldn't believe. And this is something I saw with my own eyes. The others stopped paddling, curiosity piqued. Rachel's voice was calm but grim. You ever wonder why the orphanage in Locktown only takes in girls? Martha raised a hand. Easy. The boys are sent to the militia. The militia, an armed force sponsored by nobles and merchants, was known to recruit young boys for town defense. Rachel clenched his jaw. That's the official story. He paused. But I've seen girls from that same orphanage chained up in a slave convoy. Some were older. Some were still children. The oars went still. Martha looked stunned. That's impossible. Sister Tataru runs that orphanage. She's from the Crystal Temple. She'd never. As a crystal priestess, Eileen added, she's sworn to protect those children. Odyssey said nothing. His brows were furrowed. In his heart, Sister Tataru was a figure of compassion, gentle, devoted. Maybe, Rachel said quietly. Maybe I was mistaken, but the look in his eyes said otherwise. And a heavy silence settled over the boat as it drifted up. Rachel knew it would be hard for his companions to believe him. Some truths, no matter how sincerely spoken, are impossible to accept unless seen with one's own eyes. So he didn't push the issue. Silence fell over the boat once more. The rhythmic splash of oars cutting through the Goblin River was the only sound. Each of the 5 passengers fell into their own thoughts. Though skeptical, the others knew Rachel well. He wasn't someone to speak recklessly. As a seasoned crystal demon hunter, he had seen more of the world than any of them, more than most ever would. After a long silence, Martha turned and glanced over her shoulder at him. Rachel, I'm sorry, she said softly. I'll look into it personally. Her sincerity brought faint smiles to the others. Yeah, Eileen added, her voice gentle. When we get back, we'll investigate this properly. This kind of thing. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. Something in the water had caught her attention. Eileen stood slowly, staring behind the boat, her expression tense. The others followed her gaze. One by one, they sensed it. Something was moving beneath them. The boat grew still as the crew paused. Without turning his head, Odyssey muttered under his breath, "Keep rowing. Act normal." The others resumed rowing, their movements steady though tension crackled in the air like static. "Captain," Martha whispered, "what is that?" Her hands trembled slightly on the oar. Rachel leaned forward, peering into the water. Beneath the murky surface, dark shapes darted by, swift and coordinated. "Swamp lizard men," he said grimly. Looking from above, the river shimmered like glass. Yet beneath it, dozens, no, hundreds, of shadowy figures moved in silent formation beneath the boat. The group remained motionless for nearly 30 minutes as the convoy passed below. Then, just as quietly as they had come, the lizard men vanished into the depths once more. Was that a migration? Patience asked, wiping sweat from his brow. No, Rachel replied flatly. They were all armed. This wasn't a migration, it was an army. Eileen suddenly pointed ahead. Look! All eyes turned to the northern riverbank, where the Goblin River met the endless marshlands. Lizard men, hundreds of them, were emerging from the water, wading into the swamp with eerie discipline. Row upon row marched inland, followed by more and more as if the river itself was birthing them. The 5 on the boat stared in silence. This doesn't look like intertribal movement, Martha murmured. It's too organized. A war, maybe? Eileen guessed. Some tribal conflict? Doesn't matter, Rachel snapped. We're not getting involved. Row now. His voice snapped them from their trance. The team quickly seized their oars and began paddling hard, pushing the boat upstream with urgency. What none of them noticed, however, was that they were being watched. On the shore, among the army of swamp lizard men, 3 figures observed the distant boat. They're humans, said one lizard man, his eyes narrowing. Should we deal with them? Elder Red Scale? The central figure stood out, taller, leaner, with a hide of blood-red scales. He didn't reply immediately. After a moment, Red Scale turned away. Human adventurers are unpredictable and dangerous. We won't risk a confrontation. Stay focused on the mission. With that, he strode forward, disappearing into the marching mass. The other two quickly followed, leaving the human boat behind. From above, the swamp writhed with motion, a sea of scaled warriors, moving as one. No less than 5,000 lizard men pressed northward like a dark tide. 5 days later, morning at the Grayscale tribe. The Black Mountain tribe's army entered the abandoned village from the northwest, swallowing it like a flood. Red Scale stood amidst the stilt houses, eyes scanning the vacant settlement. Empty, a lizard man scout reported. It's been deserted for some time. Red Scale gave no reaction. Shall we investigate the White Scale tribe as well? Another asked. No need, he replied. The White Scale tribe was the first hit by the Goblins. If Gray Scale and Black Scale have fallen, then White Scale is certainly gone too. He looked to the northeast. We lack intelligence on the northern swamp. Splitting up would only weaken us. With that, he led the march onward. By midday, the Lizard Man army left the abandoned Gray Scale tribe behind and continued its advance through the marshes. The next day, Northern Swamp, Wooden Fortress. Sunlight beamed down on the wooden fortress, heat shimmering in the midday haze. Atop the watchtower, Gobu Sheng shifted uncomfortably, wiping sweat from his brow. Over a month had passed since his evolution. Now, a full-fledged goblin soldier, Gobu Sheng stood over 2 meters tall, his body packed with dense muscle. Once just another big goblin, he now commanded the fortress. Behind him stood Gobu Yi and Gobu Zhang, still unevolved and therefore subordinate. Boss! Boss! They're here! A goblin burst onto the platform, panting. Who's here? Gobu Sheng barked, his foot twitching with irritation. Lizardmen, a lot of them. The irritation vanished. Gobu Sheng's eyes lit up. He laughed, a deep, booming sound echoing from the tower. So they really came. He turned to Gobu Zhang. Go find the white lizard woman. Tell her to send the males out to hunt, and spread word that the lizard men have arrived. Yes, boss. Gobu Zhang scrambled down from the tower. Gobu Sheng turned to the swampland below, eyes gleaming with anticipation. He glanced at the massive 3-bow ballista beside him and chuckled. Come on then, he growled. Let me tear you apart. The thought alone made his blood boil with excitement. Inside the fortress's largest hall, Bai Ling stood surrounded by tribal elders. The Black Mountain tribe has arrived, she said solemnly. The elders fell silent, exchanging worried glances. War had come to the swamp, and it had only...
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Revenge, revenge, this is our chance. A lizard man elder was filled with excitement. It clenched its right fist and slammed it hard on the wooden board. Its eyes were full of hatred and excitement. Having lost its wife, its life was now solely about revenge. The resentful voice made Bai Ling glance at it slightly. Revenge? With what? Even the Swamp Crocodile King has been subdued by that goblin. It's too terrifying, we must think this through. It's an anomaly among goblins, and a nightmare for all the barbarians in the Goblin Forest. We can't risk the tribe's survival. I'd rather die standing than live in humiliation. Where was this courage before? You weren't saying this before heading to the Goblin tribe. As they spoke, the elders in the wooden hut began to argue. Quiet, quiet. It was Black Scale who finally stopped the endless quarrel among the elders. Black Scale looked at Bai Ling, the high priestess, who was seated at the head, and slightly bowed its head. High priestess, please say something. As soon as these words were spoken, all the elders turned their gaze to Bai Ling, the high priestess. Facing the elders' gazes, Bai Ling sighed inwardly. At this moment, she had no choice. Before reaching the wooden fortress, she had already lost the courage to resist her master, because she knew well what the outcome of resisting her master would be. They didn't have the power for revenge. Resistance would only lead to the complete disappearance of the lizard men in the northern swamp. The surviving female tribespeople would become breeding tools for the goblins. Their plight would be 100 times more miserable than it is now. Bai Ling extended both her hands. Those who agree to submit to the goblins stand on the right. Those who agree to revenge stand on the left. The elders in the room looked at each other. No one moved. Everyone was waiting for others to act. Just as the elders were hesitating, Grayscale moved. He stood up and positioned himself to Bai Ling, the high priestess's right. Grayscale's choice made the expressions on the lizard man elders' faces vary. Black Scale was the second to rise, moving to stand beside Grayscale. With the two chieftains having made their choice, the elders no longer hesitated. Some lizard man elders stood on the right, but some lizard man elders stood on the left. The final result quickly emerged. There weren't many lizard man elders willing to risk the tribe's survival. Cowards, cowards, a bunch of cowards. I'd rather die standing than live kneeling. There were 9 lizard man elders standing on the left. They looked at the lizard men on the opposite side with disdain and hatred. The leading lizard man cursed loudly. Bai Ling, seated at the head, remained unmoved. She looked up at the lizard man elders on the left. This is our choice, and it's your own choice as well. The Black Mountain Tribe's army has already reached the northern swamp. If you can leave your wives and children behind, then leave during the next hunting trip and don't come back. Bai Ling knew well that keeping these people would be a disaster. One day, they might incite a rebellion against the master. As a goblin, the master wouldn't have the patience to give them a second chance, unless one day she gained the power to obtain freedom. Otherwise, she would never risk the tribe's survival. Rather than forcibly keeping them in the tribe, it was better to let them leave. Bai Ling, the high priestess, I hope you won't regret today's decision. The leading lizard man snorted coldly. It glanced disdainfully at the tribe's people who chose to live in humiliation, then turned and strode out. The other lizard man elders quickly followed, but 2 lizard man elders hesitated at the door. In the end, they didn't leave the wooden hut but chose to stay. Early the next morning, the wooden fortress was bustling. Hunting parties of male lizardmen left the tribe through the 4 gates to hunt. The departure of the lizardman hunting parties quietly set some things in motion. That night, in the forest on the southern shore of the Goblin River, silver moonlight bathed the earth, blocked by dense canopies. The forest was silent and pitch black, but in the darkness, a flicker of firelight was visible. Looking deeper into the forest, a campfire was burning. 5 people sat by the campfire, the adventurers. "Captain, are we almost there?" Aileen, sitting by the campfire, asked the captain out of boredom. Odyssey took out a magical map from his pocket. "Almost there." The airship's mark disappeared in the forest not far to the southeast. Hearing this, Eileen's eyes lit up. "Captain, does that mean we'll find a crashed airship tomorrow?" Odyssey shook his head and put away the magical map. "That's uncertain. We might have to search that forest for several days." "Aileen, if there are crystals nearby, you should be able to sense them, right?" Martha suddenly asked Aileen. Aileen nodded and waved her staff. "Yes, as long as they're not too far away, I can sense them." Martha smiled slightly and tossed a stick into the campfire. There should be a sizable crystal on the airship. The 4 people's eyes lit up at Martha's words. The 5 by the campfire exchanged smiles. It seemed they would soon complete their mission. "Rachel, have you ever ventured deep into the Goblin Forest before?" Martha asked Rachel curiously. She had never ventured this deep into the Goblin Forest before. Rachel shook her head. She glanced at the dark forest behind her, then turned back and adjusted her hood. The Goblin Forest borders the southern Wild Peninsula to the west, the Principality of Illicis to the north, and is flanked by the sea to the south and east. The territory of the Principality of Illicis was part of the Goblin Forest centuries ago. Although I've never ventured deep into the Goblin Forest, I know quite a bit about it. The most common barbarians in the Goblin Forest are goblins. They're one of the most disgusting creatures in this world, especially for women. Rachel's words made Martha and Aileen blush. They were naturally aware of the peculiarities of goblins. Their years as adventurers had brought them into contact with many goblin-related missions. Fortunately, they're very weak. Even a novice adventurer can take on 10 of them. However, don't underestimate goblins because of this. Rachel extended a hand. "First, goblins usually appear in groups. Don't let yourself get surrounded. Second, never chase goblins into dark caves. Third, don't think you can eradicate goblins once and for all. They're impossible to completely eliminate. Fourth, prepare plenty of mana. Fifth, goblin ears aren't worth much. They're suitable for beginners. Sixth, the greatest mystery in the world is that humans always tend to ignore the existence of goblins. Rachel rattled off a list of topics about goblins. This gave the group a better understanding of goblins. Rachel, why do we need to prepare plenty of mana? Aileen asked curiously. Rachel picked up a stick and tossed it into the campfire. He clapped his hands and looked at Aileen beside him. Aileen, you're a mage. If you're surrounded by goblins, what happens when you run out of mana? Rachel's retort left Aileen's face pale. She knew all too well what kind of fate awaited them. No wonder Rachel had warned them never to let themselves be surrounded by goblins. However, the five of them were unaware that a pair of eyes was watching them from the depths of the darkness. In the heart of the forest, less than 20 meters from a group, a shadow could be faintly seen behind a large tree. The shadow hiding behind the tree was Li Meng. This feels like a world of swords and magic from another realm. Secretly observing the human adventurers by the campfire, Li Meng thought to himself. Two men wore armor, with swords and shields, and a large axe by their sides. They were likely of the knight and warrior professions. The last man wore brown leather armor and a hood. Beside him lay a finely crafted short bow. A small blue crystal was embedded in the bow. The other two women wore black and white robes. The white-robed mage seemed to be of a priestly profession. This was evident from the religious ornaments on her chest. The black-robed mage was probably the kind of magician common in otherworldly novels. Both of their staffs were adorned with crystals. In the forest, Li Meng secretly observed the panel information of the five. Crystal Apostle Elite. Level 59. Strength 517. Defense 719. Agility 481. Magic 161. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. This was the panel attributes of the knight. His stats were nearly on par with the Swamp Crocodile King. Crystal Apostle Elite. Level 51. Strength 769. Defense 417. Agility 609. Magic 371. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. The warrior's strength was also formidable. Crystal Apostle Elite. Level 71. Strength 214. Defense 171. Agility 811. Magic 887. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. The man in leather armor was the strongest among the five. His stats leaned towards agility and magic. Crystal Apostle Elite. Level 39. Strength 13. Defense 9. Agility 11. Magic 1273. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. Crystal Magic. The mage is indeed fragile. The black-robed female mage's panel attributes made Li Meng mutter to himself. Finally, Li Meng looked at the female priest. Crystal Apostle Elite. Level 21. Strength 9. Defense 11. Agility 8. Magic 917. Crystal Magic. 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 This woman had learned too many skills. The priestess's array of crystal skills made Li Meng complain inwardly. No wonder they dared to venture deep into the goblin forest. They're indeed strong. While amazed at the strength of the five, Li Meng deeply felt the weakness of the goblins. Among the higher goblins, only the Goblin King was of elite rank. The rest were of ordinary rank. Above the elite rank, there must be even stronger ranks. Li Meng recalled the rank of Black Robe, Saint. The power of the Saint rank was clearly countless times stronger than the elite rank. Damn, how is anyone supposed to play like this? The thought of humans stronger than the elite rank gave Li Meng a headache. Never mind, let's first test the humans' combat methods. When the cart reaches the mountain, there will be a way through. For now, he could only take it one step at a time. In the future, the tribe and the pioneering legion of the Principality of Illicis would inevitably clash. The human army would surely have crystal apostles, akin to adventurers. Gathering combat intelligence on crystal apostles in advance was very necessary. In the darkness, Li Ming quietly retreated into the depths of the forest. Time slowly passed, and the night grew deeper. The campfire in the forest remained burning, never extinguishing. The adventurers did not all sleep at once. They took turns keeping watch. For slept on the ground, while one kept guard. Rachel, sitting by the campfire, cradled his bow and arrows. He was gently wiping the bow with a soft cloth. Suddenly, Rachel's expression shifted slightly as he was cleaning the bow. He stood up, staring intently into the depths of the forest. Time ticked by, and the forest remained silent. Was it a small animal? Rachel muttered softly by the campfire. No, something's wrong. Rachel's face changed. He raised his bow and drew the string. The moment he released the string, a gust of wind exploded. A small wind blade shot out with a piercing whistle. The visible, transparent wind blade surged into the depths of the forest. Wah! The next moment, a cry of pain echoed from the forest depths. A goblin fell to the ground, screaming. Its entire right arm had been severed from the shoulder. The cries of their companion enraged the goblins in the nearby forest. Wah! The dark forest suddenly erupted with the goblins' cries. Wake up, it's goblins! Hearing the familiar wah roars from the forest depths. Rachel by the campfire quickly woke his companions. The four were startled awake, jumping to their feet. Whoosh! At that moment, the sound of countless projectiles filled the forest depths. Captain! Rachel shouted loudly. He rapidly drew his bow several times. One after another, magical wind blade arrows shot out, rushing into the forest depths. Several goblins in the forest were suddenly split in two. Some goblins were decapitated, while others were sliced in half. Wherever the wind blades passed, even the shrubs were cut in half. I'll handle this. The sound of projectiles in the forest made Odyssey's face change. He stepped forward swiftly, raising his shield. Impenetrable wall. A golden light wall suddenly expanded from the shield, forming a magical light shield 5 meters wide and 3 meters high. The appearance of the light shield dispelled the surrounding darkness. Bolts shot out from the forest, striking the light shield. The bolts that hit the light shield were deflected. Are these bolts? Seeing the bolts fall to the ground, Rachel's expression changed slightly. This isn't good, Martha. Full defense. Just as Rachel finished speaking, the sound of projectiles filled the depths of the forest in all other directions. Martha frantically waved her staff. Seeing there was no time, Eileen waved her staff. Arcanum Ha, a chant that sounded like a reprimand echoed through the forest. A whirlwind suddenly arose around the five. A visible whirlwind swirled around them, sweeping up a large amount of dead leaves and dust. The bolts shooting in from all directions were blown away by the whirlwind. I'll do it. Rachel took a bow and aimed at the sky. A blue magical glow surged on the drawn bowstring. It quickly condensed into a sapphire water arrow. Whoosh! Rachel released the bowstring. With a whoosh, a blue streak shot straight into the sky through the eye of the storm. At about 500 meters high, the water arrow suddenly exploded. It transformed into a rain of arrows that poured down on the surrounding forest. Crack! The forest around them echoed with cracking sounds. The rain arrows pierced through the trees and the bodies of goblins. Wah! A series of screams erupted from the depths of the forest. The tiny rain arrows pierced through the goblins like steel needles. The non-lethal attack caused the goblins to scream in agony. As for the unlucky ones hit in the head or heart, they were already dead. Martha! The wind is dispersing. Eileen's reminder snapped Martha back to reality. She raised her staff and chanted a sacred spell. Aru Korea Allen. A dazzling blue light shone from the crystal at the tip of her staff. The next moment, a white barrier spread out from the crystal. In an instant, It enveloped the space where the 5 of them stood. As soon as the barrier formed, the outside storm vanished. Without the storm's obstruction, dozens of bolts shot through the forest from all directions. Many bolts struck the barrier and were deflected. Rachel, Patience, go deal with those ranged goblins. Eileen, hold your fire for now. Act when the time is right, and try not to make too much noise. Eileen, being a mage, would cause a huge commotion once she acted. As the captain, Odyssey took on the responsibility of directing his team. His role was to coordinate his teammates' abilities. Rachel and Patience nodded. The 2 of them dashed out of the barrier almost simultaneously. Rachel was the fastest. Her figure darted left and right, swiftly entering the forest. Patience, on the other hand, was more brute force. Wielding a large axe, he charged into the forest like a heavy tank. Bolts clanged against his armor. Sparks flew for a moment. Some bolts were deflected, but some pierced through the armor, embedding themselves in it. Once the 2 entered the forest, the sound of bolts whizzing through the air suddenly ceased. Only the rustling sounds echoed in the dark depths of the forest. Rachel, Patience, don't chase too far. The distant commotion in the forest told Odyssey that the goblins had fled. He quickly shouted into the dark depths of the forest. Before long, Rachel and a disgruntled Patience emerged from the darkness. Those goblins are no fun. They ran away just like that. Patience sat down by the campfire. He took off his helmet, his expression full of dissatisfaction. By this time, Martha had already dispelled the barrier. Captain, look at this. Rachel approached Odyssey with a few bolts in hand. Odyssey looked down at the bolts in Rachel's hand. He picked one up and examined it closely. Captain, the bolts are powerful. They easily pierce my armor. At this, Patience spoke up from beside the campfire. This drew the attention of the other 4 to him. Only then did they notice that Patience was covered in bolts. Patience, are you okay? Martha hurried over to Patience. Patience shook his head and patted his chest. I'm fine. The bolts pierced the armor, but they couldn't really hurt me. Really okay? Martha examined Patience up and down. Really, I'm fine. Martha pulled a bolt from Patience's body. Seeing no blood on the tip, she was relieved. Patience, if you're hurt, you must tell me. Patience grinned and nodded. At this point, the 5 of them returned to sit by the campfire. Captain, should we move? Aileen glanced warily at the depths of the forest behind them. Goblins were weak, but they were numerous. Fighting goblins at night was very disadvantageous for them. Humans couldn't see in the dark, but goblins could. Odyssey shook his head and set down his shield. If the goblins are really targeting us, moving won't help. You guys rest. I'll take the watch for the second half of the night. Odyssey volunteered to take the night watch for the latter half. Rachel, sitting by the campfire, looked down at the bolt in his hand. The bolt in his hand gave him a bad feeling. How could crossbows appear in the hands of goblins? And, judging by the number of bolts, it meant the goblins had quite a few crossbows. Meanwhile, about 100 meters away in the depths of the forest, humans are indeed strong. The adventurer's fighting style made Li Meng's heart race. The exquisite magic casting showed that humans had a deep understanding of magic, which led to the creation of various magical skills. No wonder just 5 people can wipe out a goblin nest. Looking at the firelight in the depths of the forest, Li Meng felt a bit restless. They were indeed plump. The smell of human flesh could be sensed from afar. That familiar scent stirred something within Li Meng. Li Meng wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth. The goblin's instincts gave him a desire to devour humans. No! Li Meng swung his right hand and slapped himself. Slap! A crisp sound echoed in the dark forest. It was strange. It wasn't his first time seeing humans. The last time he saw humans, he didn't have such a strong reaction. Li Meng rubbed his face and slowly disappeared into the darkness. Meanwhile, by the campfire in the depths of the forest, Rachel, what's wrong? Rachel suddenly stood up by the campfire. His gaze was fixed on the eastern forest. After a moment, a flash of confusion crossed Rachel's eyes. Nothing, probably just the sound of a branch falling. Hearing this, Odyssey chuckled. He knew the goblin attack had made Rachel a bit jumpy. Just a few goblins, no need to worry too much. Odyssey never thought goblins could pose a threat to the five of them. At worst, they could leave. If they wanted to leave, mere goblins couldn't stop them. Time passed slowly, and the night deepened. The next morning, Odyssey led his team southward. In the afternoon, in a dim forest, the five of them silently stared at the airship wreckage being gradually swallowed by vegetation. "Eileen, where is it?" "It's in there, very close." "I'm going in." Rachel squeezed through a narrow gap into the cabin. After a while, some noises came from inside the cabin. Before long, Rachel emerged from the gap. He went in empty-handed and came out holding a crystal. "Captain, how do you think the airship crashed?" Odyssey took the crystal from Rachel's hand, looking at her with curiosity. "Rachel, did you discover something?" Perhaps Rachel found something in the cabin. Rachel turned to look at the wreckage of the airship. There are many holes in the wreckage, clearly pierced by some sharp weapon. A sharp weapon pierced the hull? Rachel's words made the four of them scrutinize the airship wreckage. Indeed, there were many places on the wreckage that had been pierced. A sharp weapon? Could the airship have encountered some powerful, flying magical beast? Patience thought that some flying magical beast could also cause such holes. Confirming the airship's crash completes our task. Let's go. The result of the airship crash had lost its meaning for further investigation. Several months had passed. In a place like the Goblin Forest, all traces would be erased. The people on the ship had long been devoured by the magical beasts in the forest, leaving not even bones behind. Next, Odyssey led his companions back into the depths of the forest from where they came. Good. Hurry up and leave. Don't come back again. Next time you won't be able to leave." At this moment, Li Ming was secretly watching the adventurer squad from deep within the forest. Seeing the adventurer squad leave, Li Ming, hiding in the trees, grinned. If he weren't afraid of attracting those two strong humans, he wouldn't have let the adventurer squad leave so easily. Now, Li Ming just wanted that adventurer squad to hurry up and scram, so he could focus on dealing with the series of events that followed. Thus, for the next 2 days, Li Ming kept a distant tail on the adventurer squad. To avoid being discovered, he kept a very long distance. On the morning of the third day, in the forest on the southern shore of the Goblin River, Odyssey and his team pushed a small boat hidden in the woods into the water. Standing on the shore, Rachel looked uncertainly into the depths of the forest. "Rachel, what's wrong? Get on the boat." The four were already on the boat, waiting for Rachel. "Coming." Rachel turned and hurriedly boarded the boat. As the oars moved, the small boat gradually drifted downstream. "Captain, it seems like something has been following us in the dark these past 2 days." Only when the small boat was far from the shore did Rachel take a deep breath. Something was following them in the dark. The four exchanged glances. Only Odyssey had a thoughtful expression on his face, just as the small boat gradually disappeared on the river's surface. At the place where the five had entered the water, a strong green-skinned figure emerged from the forest. Watching the direction the small boat left, Li Ming grinned menacingly. "Great! Those troublemakers have finally left." Li Ming had already thought of a way to change things back. As long as he sped up the timeline, he would have enough time to deal with any threat. Before long, the figure on the shore had disappeared. In the afternoon, at the Goblin Nest, Li Ming hurriedly emerged from the forest and entered the cave. "Boss, what about that group of adventurers?" Seeing the boss return, Goblin quickly approached. Recalling the recent battle with the humans, Goblin's face showed a greedy expression. Human meat was so delicious. Once tasted, it was unforgettable. "They've already left. They're not to be messed with. Even 10 of you would be courting death." Goblins were useless except for their numbers. When he first arrived in this other world, Li Ming thought Goblin was strong. He should belong to the top combat power of this world. Only now did he realize that what he thought was the top was just the starting point of this world's martial power. Goblin shrank his neck, giving a sheepish smile. It had also watched the battle from afar that night. The human adventurers were indeed very strong. In just a moment, they had killed 40 of its underlings. Goblin, take all the magic crystals off the wall and send them to the throne cave. Goblin quickly nodded, although he didn't know what the boss wanted with those shiny things. But Goblin didn't ask more. After all, those things on the wall were of no use. I have to go back, Goblin. In a while, go stay at the throne tribe. The number of goblins here must be maintained at around 2,000. The hunting territory controlled by the goblin nest was quite large. Feeding 2,000 goblins was no problem. And now, the number of goblins in the goblin nest was less than 700. Goblin nodded enthusiastically with excitement. Li Meng didn't linger in the goblin nest and soon left. A few hours later, before dark, on the southern shore of the Goblin River. It hasn't melted yet. When Li Meng emerged from the forest, he was surprised by the scene before him. After so many days, the ice path was still there and showed no signs of melting, due to the water level dropping significantly in recent days. The ice layer was suspended above the water. The two shores became the only support points. But even so, the ice path still hadn't collapsed. The skill upgrade is indeed powerful. No wonder it was a skill with a king in its name. Grinning, Li Meng stepped on the ice path and walked toward the opposite shore. Northern Swamp. Afternoon at the wooden fortress, with Goblin and Gobu leading reinforcements to arrive. The goblin forces stationed at the wooden fortress reached 4,000, plus around 2,000 lizard men. The total population of the wooden fortress reached 6,000. This made the wooden fortress become crowded. The afternoon was originally the quietest time at the wooden fortress. But just then, the goblins' wah-wah cries suddenly sounded on the southern wooden wall. Ooh! The deep war horn followed closely. The sound of the horn made the wooden fortress erupt into chaos, like a drop of water falling into a pot of oil. The entire wooden fortress boiled over. A large number of goblins rushed out from the various wooden huts. They cried out as they surged toward the southern wooden wall. At this time, in the depths of the southern swamp, in a relatively deep water area, a large ripple appeared on the water surface. Looking into the water, one could see fleeting black shadows. At the boundary of the deep water area, a large number of lizard men emerged from the water. They stood up from the water, wading forward. In no time, the lizard men on the shore appeared densely packed. At a glance, the dark mass of lizard men continued to emerge from the water. Before long, a massive army appeared in the southern swamp of the wooden fortress. Nearly 5,000 lizard men stretched across the area. The water area of nearly a kilometer was filled with their figures. Although they didn't have a neat formation, just standing there exuded an endless might. They've finally come. At this moment, on a watchtower on the southern wooden wall of the wooden fortress, Gobu grinned menacingly, excitedly watching the overwhelming army of lizard men outside. It had been waiting for this day for a long, long time. Today, it finally awaited the arrival of the lizard man army. Elder Redscale. This is the wooden fortress outpost. Outside, among the lizard man army, a group of lizard men gathered together, observing the wooden fortress outpost 500 meters away. The lizard man beside Redscale glared angrily at the wooden fortress outpost. Hatred for the goblins had turned it into a traitor. It even concealed the existence of the swamp crocodile king. Redscale gazed solemnly at the distant wooden fortress outpost. It hadn't expected the goblins to build such a large wooden fortress in the swamp. What were they planning? Goblins couldn't adapt to the swamp's humid environment. Though puzzled, Redscale felt no fear. It nodded to its companion beside it. Attack! The lizard man next to Redscale ran off at the command. "Alala!" They shouted, waving their stone machetes. All the lizard men raised their weapons, shouting "Alala!" The overwhelming sound echoed across the land. The lizard men inside the wooden fortress also heard the commotion outside. The familiar shouts made all the lizard men leave their wooden huts. They looked expectantly at the outer wooden walls. "Shut them up! Shoot them dead!" The lizardman's shouting was unbearable for Goblin. With a roar, it picked up the war horn beside it and blew it. The urgent sound of the horn rang out again. This was the order to attack. The goblins on the watchtower, operating the three-bow ballista, looked excited. they shouted as they aimed the ballista at the distant lizardman army. Boom! The sound of the bowstring snapping back was heard, accompanied by the sharp whistling of bolts cutting through the air. Huge bolts flew out, heading straight for the lizardman army 500 meters away. Boom! The lizardman formation was too dense. Over a dozen bolts crashed into the lizardman ranks. With loud explosions, the lizardman ranks were thrown into chaos. The massive bolts pierced through several lizardmen, crashing into the water. Water splashed everywhere, and the lizardmen screamed in agony. The sudden attack startled Red Scale. How could the goblins attack them from such a distance? Everyone, charge! At this critical moment, there was no retreat. Red Scale raised its large machete, shouting loudly. It was the first to charge towards the wooden fortress outpost, wading through the water. Kill them, Allah! With Red Scale's movement, the surrounding lizardmen responded. The massive lizardman army surged towards the wooden fortress outpost like a flood from a broken dam. More loud explosions accompanied by screams. Huge bolts continued to crash into the lizardman ranks. Everything in their path was destroyed. The massive impact sent anything touched by the bolts flying. The dark mass of the lizardman army surged towards the wooden fortress outpost like a wave. Boom! At that moment, a deafening sound suddenly erupted from the right side of the lizardman ranks. In the right wing of the lizardman formation, a massive water column shot into the sky. Before the water column rose, the lizardmen in that area were instantly torn to pieces. The rising water column flung a large group of lizardmen into the air. But it wasn't over. Huge water bullets came from the right wing. Each water bullet landed precisely among the lizardmen. Lizardmen, touched by the water bullets, were instantly torn apart. The water bullets exploded with a boom upon impact. The scattered raindrops pierced through lizardmen within tens of meters like steel needles. The right wing of the lizardman ranks was filled with screams. It's the Swamp Crocodile King. It's the Swamp Crocodile King. The lizardmen on the right quickly identified the culprit attacking them. In a nearby swamp, a massive creature was staring at them. The giant creature opened its menacing mouth, spitting out water balls. Under the combined attack of the three-bow ballista and the Swamp Crocodile King, the lizardmen suffered heavy casualties. They hadn't even approached the wooden fortress outpost, and already hundreds were dead or injured. The appearance of the Swamp Crocodile King filled the lizardmen with fear. They couldn't understand why the Swamp Crocodile King would help the goblins. How could goblins exist where the Swamp Crocodile King was? Damn it, what on earth is going on? Red Scale grabbed the neck of the lizardman who had led them there. The lizardman, caught by Red Scale, showed no fear. It laughed maniacally. Kill them, quickly kill them. The lizardman's madness made Red Scale frown slightly. You lunatic! It cursed, throwing the lizardman aside. Retreat, retreat, retreat. Red Scale shouted, turning and running back the way they came without looking back. The appearance of the Swamp Crocodile King caught Red Scale off guard. It wasn't fear, but the knowledge that the army lacked the means to deal with the Swamp Crocodile King. It hadn't prepared for this. Continuing the fight would only lead to the futile loss of its kin's lives. Red Scale's retreat caused the charging lizardman ranks to falter. The lizardmen around Red Scale were the first to react to its order. Seeing their companions flee, the lizardmen further away joined the retreat. And so, the charging lizardmen were defeated. They fled in panic under the dual attack of the three-bow ballista and the Swamp Crocodile King. Screams echoed all the way. The sound of bolts and water bullets crashing resounded in the sky outside the wooden fortress outpost. The lizardmen who reached the deep water boundary dove into the water. Leaving behind nearly 1,000 corpses, the lizardman army fled in disarray. Wow, wow. Seeing the lizardman army retreat, the goblins on the wooden wall cheered excitedly. They danced and celebrated. For a moment, the wooden fortress outpost was filled with noise. Inside the wooden fortress, the lizardmen looked disappointed. Run, run. At the entrance of the largest wooden hut, Bai Ling stood outside, gazing at the southern wooden wall. She murmured to herself, a hint of sadness in her eyes. From now on, her kin would live under the shadow of the goblins. Before long, the fleeing lizardman army disappeared into the swamp. A bunch of cowards running away so quickly, huh? Seeing the lizardman army vanish, Gobu and Gobu on the watchtower laughed heartily. They were amused by the cowardice of the lizardmen, and by how foolishly the lizardmen had fallen for the trap, and by the completely unscathed outcome. The laughter on the watchtower lasted for a long time. The next day, inside the largest wooden hut at the wooden fortress outpost, didn't you say the lizardman army retreated without a fight? Li Meng looked speechlessly at Gobu, who was eagerly reporting yesterday's battle. How did it turn into a fight? Li Meng pondered, a contemplative look on his face. It seemed the retreat without a fight predicted by the simulated life wasn't the kind he imagined. At least the casualties weren't too bad. That was probably the only consolation. Li Meng didn't want to see the future line winding back again. If the expeditionary force suffered too many casualties, it would prompt the Black Mountain tribe to summon the barbarian god Aqua. Li Meng always remembered this future line. Li Meng shook his head and raised his hand to stop Gobu from continuing his chatter. You've done well with this matter. Very good. I'm quite satisfied. Gobu and Gobu, the two big fellows, grinned widely. The boss's praise made them very excited. Li Meng turned his head to look at Bai Ling and the group of lizardman elders on the other side. I give you two choices. 1. Each of you returns to your own tribe, and the goblins will garrison here. 2. Your 3 tribes merge into one, and this place will serve as the new tribe's headquarters, and the goblins will withdraw. Since the new tribe is destined to appear, he might as well propose it to speed up the timeline. The key to changing the future lies in time. Hearing this, Bai Ling showed a look of surprise. She hadn't expected the master to ask their 3 tribes to merge into one. Master, we need some time. Li Meng raised his hand to interrupt Bai Ling. Discuss it here. I need an answer. Your choice will affect what I do next. Li Meng's words made Bai Ling's heart tighten. She dared not be careless, and quickly turned to discuss with the elders. A dozen lizard men gathered together, whispering. This aroused the curiosity of the goblins inside the house. Before long, Bai Ling and the lizardman elders had reached a conclusion. Bai Ling turned to face the master once again. Master, we choose to establish a new tribe, named the Yu Clan. The words Yu Clan made a trace of amazement flash in Li Meng's eyes. The future predicted by the simulated life was indeed the true future line. Very well, prepare the tribute. I will withdraw the troops tomorrow. Also, to avoid casualties due to food issues with the tribute from now on, you will provide the food for the tribute, and I will handle the transportation. Li Meng was not worried that the Yu Clan would run away. Those tributes were hostages, and the Yu Clan had nowhere else to go after leaving the northern swamp. Although the Black Mountain Swamp was an excellent choice, the lizard men in the northern swamp all came from the Black Mountain Swamp. The reason the lizard men of the northern swamp left the Black Mountain Swamp must have been due to some grievances with the Black Mountain tribe. Unless absolutely necessary, the lizard men of the northern swamp would not return to the Black Mountain Swamp. Bai Ling slightly lowered her head. Yes, master. I will prepare the tribute. In the time that followed, Bai Ling became busy. Preparing the tribute was just a word, but implementing it would encounter many difficulties. Throughout the afternoon, the cries of lizard men echoed within the wooden fortress. It wasn't until nightfall that the wooden fortress gradually quieted down. That night, the wooden fortress was silent. The weather was good, with a full moon in the sky. The silver moonlight spread across the land, slightly dispelling the darkness. At the entrance of the largest wooden house, Li Meng gazed up at the full moon. Isn't this a bit too perverse? Recalling the scene of Bai Ling selecting tributes in the afternoon, Li Meng found it unforgettable. For the lizard men, it was a scene of utter horror. But Li Meng couldn't empathize. Instead, he felt an indescribable excitement. The stronger the lizardman's negative emotions, the more pleasure he felt. Blame it on encountering a clever goblin. He was now a goblin, no longer human. Li Meng had long accepted this fact. If he, as a goblin, still acted like a human, he would have ended up as a pile of dung on the ground. At least you can live, while I am still struggling to survive. Li Meng did not compromise with the guilt of human consciousness. Standing at the door, bathed in moonlight, he turned and entered the wooden house. Bai Ling was inside the wooden house, but Li Meng did not touch her. The only difference between Li Meng and a goblin was his strong self-control. Reproducing and releasing desire was fine, but only if necessary. Without the necessity, he would rather sleep. Time passed bit by bit, and the night gradually deepened. Early the next morning, at the break of dawn, the wooden fortress was bustling. The goblin army stationed at the wooden fortress began to withdraw in an orderly manner. The watchtowers were not dismantled and still stood on the wooden walls. But the 3-bow ballistae on the watchtowers had been dismantled. The wooden fortress could be given to the Yu clan, but the 3-bow ballistae could not be left to the lizardmen. The lizardmen, serving as tributes, were also bidding their final farewells to their families. This farewell meant they would not meet again until a year later. As the morning light rose in the eastern sky, the bustle in the wooden fortress reached its peak. A massive procession exited through the east gate of the wooden fortress. Countless figures, large and small, formed a continuous mass. In the swamp, they formed a cloud moving eastward. But before long, the massive procession scattered like loose sand. Thousands of people marching together could not meet their food needs. So they had to spread out, break into smaller groups, and hunt while returning to the tribe. It wasn't until 5 days later that the scattered groups gradually returned to the tribe. Thus, the northern swamp incident came to an end. The tribe's development returned to its normal course. It was another new day in the morning. On the second day after returning to the tribe, Li Meng became busy again. Early in the morning, Li Meng crawled out from a pile of female lizardmen. Although Bai Ling was no longer there, the task of reproduction could not be neglected. There were 13 beds in the throne cave. Therefore, Bai Ling had selected 13 lizardmen from the new batch of tributes. They were all daughters of elders. With a click, the door of the throne cave opened. Li Meng stretched and walked out of the wooden house. "Go find Gobu Gao. Have him come see me." The goblin guarding the door quickly ran into the depths of the forest. Before long, some sounds came from inside the wooden house. The female lizardmen inside had woken up. They silently picked up the scattered animal skin skirts and put them on. Last night had exhausted them. They felt weak all over, their limbs sore. Some female lizardmen lay on the bed, unable to get up, their tails swinging. "Boss, boss!" Suddenly, loud cries came from outside the wooden house. Gobu Gao came running from the depths of the forest, wagging his tail. "Gobu Gao, do you remember the place where we cut down trees for timber when building the wooden fortress?" Gobu Gao quickly nodded. "Yes, boss. Do we need to cut trees there again?" "Yes. Take your offspring to that place and build a stronghold. The stronghold would be built by the water and have a dock. The Yu clan would send food needed for the tribute by water to the stronghold. Then the goblins at the stronghold would deliver the food to the tribe. The stronghold should be built by the water, with a dock for small boats." In the time that followed, Li Meng explained to Gobu Gao what a dock was. He also instructed him on the scale and style of the stronghold. "Boss, this is simple. Leave it to me." Li Meng nodded and waved his hand. "Go ahead. Set off once you're ready." Li Meng was quite strict with the leaders in the tribe. Ordinary goblins could just muddle through as goblins. After all, they didn't have strong independent thinking abilities. But the leaders were different. They had to become smarter. Otherwise, under his banner, those less intelligent leaders would eventually be eliminated. They would die outside like cannon fodder one day. Gobu Gao grinned, turned around, and scampered off into the depths of the forest. "Boss, boss!" Just as Gobu Gao left, a loud shouting came from the forest. A strong, tall figure came running over, panting. It was Gobu E, who had successfully evolved into a goblin soldier. "Boss, I've evolved. Do I look cool?" Gobu E, standing in front of Li Meng, showed off his muscles. Both hands pounded his chest like a gorilla. Li Meng looked Gobui up and down. Name, Go. Race, Goblin Soldier. Level, 20. Strength, 134. Defense, 117. Agility, 121. Magic, 51. The stats were decent, almost catching up to Gobaba. Bear in mind, Gobu-e was just a goblin soldier now. He was still one goblin warrior away from being a goblin leader, truly worthy of being his descendant. The potential of goblins indeed relied on the paternal line. Not bad, not bad. Looking at Gobu-e in front of him, Li Meng nodded repeatedly. Indeed, it was impressive, very impressive. His descendants had such strong stats. It showed that his method of improving the goblin quality in the tribe through his bloodline was correct. To make goblins no longer weak, they just had to keep reproducing. The boss's praise made Gobu-e grin obsequiously. The big guy's hunched posture looked somewhat comically cute. Gobu-e, you're just in time. Go and build a road. Build a road. Gobu-e looked puzzled, a bit at a loss. It means cutting a path through the forest that's easy to travel. In the following time, Li Meng explained to Gobu-e what a road was. He also taught Gobu-e the measurement unit meter. After more than half an hour of explanation, Gobu-e finally grinned. Boss, this is simple. Leave it to me. Li Meng nodded and waved his hand. Go ahead. Set off once you're ready. Gobu-e turned around and scampered off. Compared to staying in the tribe, Gobu-e preferred going out to do things. Anything would do, as long as he wasn't idle. Watching Gobu-e's joyful departing figure, Li Meng grinned. Goblins might be a bit disgusting and evil, but likewise, goblin evilness was very pure. If only goblins had females, then goblins could become a normal and strong tribe of barbarians. Until Gobu-e's figure disappeared into the depths of the forest, Li Meng withdrew his gaze. Then he turned to look at the goblin underling guarding outside the door. Goblin, keep an eye on the leaders returning to the tribe these days. Have them stay in the tribe for now. Don't go out. Wait for my orders. The goblin guarding outside the wooden house quickly nodded. Then Li Meng left the throne cave, heading towards the direction of the carpentry workshop. Not long after, outside the carpentry workshop. Boss, why are you here? On the open ground outside the carpentry workshop, Gobada was fiddling with a bunch of wagon wheels. He held a hammer, tapping on the iron rims of the wheels. The clanging sound echoed throughout the tribe. Li Meng had heard the sound of metal clashing from afar. Seeing the boss approaching, Gobada quickly put down his work. He scampered over to greet him. In the following days, Li Meng stayed in the carpentry workshop, patiently teaching Gobada how to make wagons. Although the wagon wheels were made, building the wagon body was also a technical task. However, compared to the wheels, the wagon body was relatively simpler. In less than half a month, Gobada had learned quite well. A little better would be great, a little worse was no problem. Li Meng didn't have high demands for goblins as long as it worked. Another new day, in the morning. Boss, is this a wagon? Outside the carpentry workshop, Gobada looked curiously at the monster in front of him. Yes, it was a monster, an ugly monster. In the forest outside the carpentry workshop stood an ugly wagon. The wagon had 4 large wheels. Each one was slightly taller than a goblin. The body was just a simple flatbed. On top of the flatbed, cargo boxes could be made as needed. In the short term, the wagon would mainly transport aquatic products. Therefore, 2 water tanks resembling coffins were placed beside it. The water tanks, placed side by side on the flatbed, fit perfectly. Yes, this is a wagon. Li Meng originally wanted to call it a bore cart, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. It's just a name, no need to be too particular. At this moment, a series of grunting pig sounds came from not far away. 2 goblins led 2 wild boars over. Boss, the wild boars are here. Li Meng looked up and down at the 2 sturdy wild boars. Little piggies, come here. At Li Meng's call, the wild boars obediently walked over to him. Then Li Meng guided the wild boars to the front of the wagon. Stand here, yes. Move your butts over. After a while, under Li Meng's guidance, the wild boars stood side by side in front of the wagon. Li Meng worked his hands skillfully to fit the wild boars with special transport saddles. After a while, everything was ready. Looking at the wagon in front of him, Li Meng nodded in satisfaction. Next was the test ride. If there were no issues, they could be mass-produced. Li Ming climbed onto the wagon, grabbed the reins. Sitting on the wagon, Li Ming grinned. He tugged the reins, flicked them up and down. In the forest, there was a snap sound. The two sturdy wild boars started trotting. The wagon moved, slowly driving through the tribe. Fortunately, the tribe had enough space for the wagon to move. Li Ming pulled the reins to the left, and the wild boars turned left. The front two wagon wheels also turned left under the pull of the wild boars. Actually, the main part of the wagon was the front two wheels. The rear wheels were attached to the front wheel axle disc. Without that disc, the four-wheeled wagon couldn't turn flexibly. But likewise, with that disc, the wagon structure became much more complex. However, this wasn't a problem for Li Ming. He had already simplified the wagon structure as much as possible. Yes, very stable. Li Ming was very satisfied with the wagon's performance. With the wagon, transporting supplies between the tribe and the outpost would be much more convenient, although they could follow the Goblin River for water transport. But since the tribe wasn't on the shore, the Goblin River has a flood season and often overflows. This makes water and land transportation time-sensitive. Building a dock on the shore is also a big challenge. When the flood season comes, any structure will be destroyed. What is the boss doing? The commotion in the tribe caught the attention of the higher-ranking goblins who had been waiting for a long time. They left their wooden huts one by one, curiously watching. In the tribe, the boss was riding a strange creature. The creature needed two wild boars to pull it to run. Boss, I want to play too. Goblin chased after the carriage, bouncing along. As it chased, it shouted loudly. Li Ming glanced at Goblin's massive figure. As a goblin warrior, Goblin was a giant standing 2.5 meters tall. Climb up. Li Ming grinned, giving permission. It was a good opportunity to test the carriage's load capacity. Goblin smiled excitedly and quickly climbed onto the carriage. As Goblin got on, the carriage sank instantly. Wheel marks appeared on the ground. I want to play too, I want to. Another goblin soldier came running over, bouncing along. Come on, all of you get on. Li Ming laughed loudly, granting permission. The goblin soldier quickly climbed onto the flatbed. Boss, I want to play too. I want to. Seeing the other goblins getting on the carriage, the rest couldn't resist. The higher-ranking goblins all ran towards the carriage. Move forward, let me on. No space, no space. You're stepping on my leg. Are you looking for trouble? How dare you touch me? So what if I touch you? The boss let me on. The higher-ranking goblins scrambled to climb onto the carriage. As they piled on, the carriage's speed slowed down. The wild boars pulling the carriage were visibly struggling. Their bodies leaned forward, panting heavily. The carriage creaked as if it would fall apart at any moment. The noise behind made Li Ming, who was driving the carriage, turn his head. What he saw made Li Ming jump in fright. The goblins, who had squeezed onto the carriage, had formed a mountain of flesh. Goblin, who was the first to get on, was crushed underneath. Get off quickly, you're going to break the carriage. Before Li Ming could finish his sentence, there was a crack. The four wheels of the carriage twisted and collapsed almost simultaneously. The carriage suddenly sank. The goblins on the carriage tumbled off, rolling onto the ground. Fortunately, Li Ming reacted quickly and jumped off in time. Looking at the disastrous scene of the accident, Li Ming's mouth twitched. You fools! Li Ming's roar suddenly echoed through the tribe. The sound was so loud that it startled birds and beasts in a large area of the forest. The female lizard men watching the commotion giggled. The goblins at that moment were truly comical. The goblins who got up shrank their necks and smiled ingratiatingly. They backed away, their eyes wandering. As soon as the boss's gaze moved away from them, they would immediately run away. Taking a deep breath, Li Ming grinned fiercely. Since you're here, let's get things done. Follow me, bring some food. Call everyone who hasn't come. Gather at the Iron Cave. With that, Li Ming strode towards the direction of the Iron Cave. Watching the boss's departing figure, the higher-ranking goblins looked at each other. At that moment, they felt a bit panicked. But since the boss had said so, they had no choice but to follow. I'll go get food. Me too. And so, Li Ming led a group of higher-ranking goblins in a grand procession heading north. Half an hour later, outside the Iron Cave, Li Ming emerged from the forest, bathed in the scorching sunlight. Li Ming looked up at the glaring sun. "This is the place. Bring the knife." A goblin quickly handed over a knife. The knife wasn't big, resembling a kitchen knife. "Bring the meat." There was movement in the cave. More than 10 goblins carried a wild boar carcass, panting as they approached. They set it down less than 3 meters from Li Ming. Holding the kitchen knife, Li Ming turned to look at the higher-ranking goblins. There were a lot of them, nearly 100. Most were big goblins and goblin soldiers. "Now, I'm going to teach you how to store food." Although goblins eat carrion, they prefer fresh meat. They can get the necessary moisture from the meat alone. Therefore, it's rare to see goblins drinking water directly. Even if they do drink, they don't drink much. Drinking too much can lead to diarrhea at best, water intoxication at worst. Making jerky is very simple. You can remove the moisture from the meat by drying and roasting it. Dried jerky can be preserved for a longer time without rotting. The next day, in the afternoon, outside the Iron Cave, "Boss, I don't like eating jerky." Looking down at the jerky in his hand, Goblin had a mournful expression. "You have to eat it even if you don't like it. It may not taste good, but it fills your stomach and gives you strength to fight. During wars with other barbarians and humans, we can't waste time hunting. Eat." Since yesterday, the first batch of jerky had already dried. There were several racks on the open ground outside the Iron Cave. Strips of jerky hung from the racks. Facing the boss's gaze, Goblin had no choice but to force the jerky into his mouth and chew. As he chewed, Goblin's eyes lit up. His big mouth kept moving, eating with great relish. After a while, the jerky was finally chewed and swallowed. "How does it taste?" Goblin quickly nodded. "Boss, it's very chewy. The more I chew, the tastier it gets." Li Ming grinned, feeling very satisfied. It seemed goblins could accept jerky after all. Li Ming glanced around at his higher-ranking goblin underlings. "Remember what I taught you. This is dry food, and you must learn to prepare it yourselves." The goblin underlings nodded repeatedly. The process of making jerky wasn't complicated. They had memorized it and would try it out when they returned. "All right, disperse." The higher-ranking goblins scattered in a rush. They all entered the forest, heading toward the tribe. Li Ming turned and entered the Iron Cave. Bin was about to return, bringing back a large group of ogres. Ogres couldn't be exposed to sunlight. Therefore, they needed to be equipped with full body armor. With armor shielding them, they wouldn't have to fear sunlight. However, making the armor couldn't be rushed. The sizes of the ogres would definitely vary. If not custom-made, the armor wouldn't be comfortable for them to wear. They could first forge the weapons needed for the ogres. In the following days, Li Ming stayed in the Iron Cave and didn't go anywhere. Some things outside were quietly happening. The future predicted by the simulated life could be changed, but some things were bound to happen, and Li Ming wouldn't stop the events that triggered them. Another new day, in the northern forest of the Goblin lands. The forest was dim and silent, eerily quiet. Yet, beneath the seemingly tranquil surface, danger lurked. Amidst the dense forest vegetation, a group of small green figures moved stealthily. Their movements were slow and subtle. Though they brushed past flowers and grass, they made no sound. They exchanged glances and gestured to each other. The goblins, initially gathered together, dispersed to the left and right. As they moved forward, the goblin at the front suddenly crouched down. It crawled through the underbrush. The other goblins followed suit. They all lay in the grass, inching forward bit by bit. Before long, Goblin parted the grass, blocking its view with its hand. In the clearing beyond, a herd of forest deer was grazing. The flowers, grass, and trees of the forest were their food. Goblin didn't rush to act. It lay in the grass, patiently waiting. Goo-goo. Before long, the sound of goo-goo echoed from other directions in the forest. One call, 2 calls, 3 calls. 1 call represented 1 direction. 2 calls represented 2 directions. 3 calls represented 3 directions. The goo-goo sounds in the forest caught the attention of the forest deer. They raised their heads warily, looking around. But their not-so-bright minds couldn't discern the authenticity of the bird calls. When the third call sounded, Gobichai grinned from its hiding spot in the grass. It suddenly stood up, with its crossbow aimed at the nearby forest deer. At the moment it pulled the trigger, it shouted "Alulu!" Whoosh! With the twang of the bowstring, the bolt shot through the air. Almost simultaneously, the sound of bolts piercing the air echoed from all directions of the forest surrounding the deer. Dozens of bolts plunged into the herd of forest deer. More than 10 forest deer were hit instantly. Their bodies were riddled with bolts. The intense pain caused the forest deer to collapse, wailing in agony. They struggled, but the more they struggled, the faster the blood flowed. The forest deer that were lucky enough not to be hit by the bolts scattered in panic. Their massive bodies charged like heavy tanks. Wah-wah! Seeing the fleeing forest deer about to escape the encirclement. Suddenly, some goblins wielding long spears emerged from the dense grass. They shouted excitedly, their faces full of exhilaration. The forest deer were startled by the sudden appearance of the goblins. They quickly turned to run, but it was too late. The goblins hurled their long spears like javelins at the forest deer that were within reach. Thud! Another few cries of anguish. The long spears pierced deeply into the bodies of the forest deer. The wounded forest deer struggled to run a few dozen meters before collapsing to the ground. Out of the herd of over 20 forest deer, only 5 managed to escape the hunt. Those 5 were pregnant does. They were intentionally spared by the goblins. Wah-wah! A successful hunt made the goblins cheer as they emerged from the dense vegetation. Their eyes gleamed with greed as they gazed at the forest deer carcasses scattered around, especially the still-living forest deer, which drew the goblins' focus. Meat, meat, let's eat, let's eat. Gobichai excitedly raised its crossbow, shouting. With the leader's permission, the starving goblins rushed forward. They pounced greedily on the forest deer carcasses, devouring them. The still-living forest deer were also fought over by the goblins. Don't drop your weapons. Gobichai kicked a passing goblin underling. The goblin was so excited it had dropped its weapon. The kicked goblin scrambled back to retrieve its discarded crossbow before eagerly rushing toward the meat. Gobichai's shout made many goblins shrink their necks. They quickly tore off a piece of intestine to find their discarded weapons. If anyone lets their weapon out of their sight again, I'll eat them. As a goblin soldier, Gobichai was quite intimidating. Even the goblins gnawing on the forest deer looked up fearfully at Gobichai. After intimidating the underlings, Gobichai contentedly approached its feast. As the leader, only it had the privilege of enjoying a half-dead prey alone, while the goblins were feasting in the forest. In the depths of the eastern forest, there was some commotion. Tall, bulky figures were sprinting through the dim forest, accompanied by panting breaths. It was the pigmen tribe running through the forest. There were quite a few of them, at least 30 in sight. It's the goblins, kill them. The leading pigmen spotted the goblins feasting ahead. Oink ha! In the dim forest, the sound of oink oink echoed. Dozens of pigmen warriors charged at the goblins. The commotion from the eastern forest caught the goblins' attention. Not good, it's the pigmen tribe. As the warning was shouted, a few pigmen burst from the bushes first. They raised their iron large machetes, charging at the nearest goblins. The goblins, busy eating, didn't react in time. As they stood up, the large machetes came down. Several goblins were immediately slashed to the ground by the pigmen. The large machetes tore through most of the goblins' bodies. The goblins didn't even have time to scream before they perished. Kill them. Fortunately, the goblins were scattered throughout the forest, though the pigmen slaughtered over 10 goblins like chopping vegetables. The other goblins quickly reacted. They abandoned the fresh, delicious meat and joined the battle. Wah-wah! Goblins wielding long spears rushed eagerly at the pigmen. Crossbow goblins quickly drew their strings and loaded their bolts. When the sound of bolts piercing the air echoed through the forest again, several pigmen fell to the ground, unable to rise. The fallen pigmen let out cries of agony. Their bodies were deeply pierced by several bolts. Some pigmen even had their foreheads penetrated, dying instantly. In the forest, a chaotic battle erupted, though the individual strength of the pigmen was greater than that of the goblins. The goblins had a far superior number. Before long, the pigmen were surrounded by over 100 goblins. Since the pigmen were much taller than the goblins, this gave the crossbow goblins an excellent shooting angle. They didn't have to worry about hitting their comrades. Even if they missed, the bolts would fly upward and embed in the tree trunks. Roar! A pigman in the forest let out a roar. It wielded a large machete, facing the attack of 3 goblins. The 3 goblins circled around it. It lunged forward, slashing at a goblin. The goblin dodged to the left, avoiding the strike. The pigmen quickly pursued, slashing again at the scrambling goblin. But the goblin behind it thrust its long spear at the pigmen. Ah! The pigmen let out a cry of pain. 2 long spears. One pierced its buttocks. The other pierced its waist. The spearhead was plunged deep into the body. An enraged pigman swung his blade at the neck of a goblin, scrambling to escape. The goblin's head flew off instantly. A bowl-sized spray of foul-smelling blood shot into the air. The injured pigman gritted his teeth and swung his blade behind him. Thud! As soon as he turned, a bolt struck his head. The bolt pierced through the left side of the pigman's skull. The pigman's eyes rolled back, and his massive, fat body collapsed heavily to the ground. The battle didn't last long. In less than 5 minutes of fighting, more than half of the pigmen were down. This terrified the remaining pigmen. They couldn't understand how the usually weak goblins had become so formidable. In the past, 10 pigmen warriors could easily drive away 100 goblins. Oink oink! A sharp pig squeal echoed through the dim forest. The pigmen in battle quickly disengaged. They turned and ran into the forest without looking back. As they fled, a few more pigmen were hit and fell to the ground. Wow, wow! Seeing the pigmen run, the goblins shouted excitedly and gave chase. But soon, the pigmen had vanished from sight. Despite their plump appearance, pigmen were actually very agile. Moreover, their large size allowed them to outrun the short-legged goblins. Stop chasing, come back now. Hearing the commotion in the forest fading away, Goblin shouted loudly. His voice echoed through the forest, reaching the ears of the goblins chasing the pigmen. The boss's roar made the goblins stop immediately. They turned and scampered back the way they came. It was only then that the goblins remembered something. Their feast wasn't finished yet. If they returned late, there would be nothing left. Hearing the noise in the forest getting closer again, Goblin grinned. He hadn't forgotten the boss's instructions. The boss had said not to engage with the pigmen. If they encountered them in the forest, they should avoid or stay away. The pigmen attacked first. The boss can't blame me. Thinking of the boss, Goblin shrank his neck. Should he hide this from the boss? Goblin's little brain quickly pondered. As long as the boss didn't know, he wasn't wrong. As long as the boss didn't know, it would be as if nothing happened. Thinking of this, Goblin grinned. I'm so smart. Goblin nodded, deciding to go with this plan. After all, the boss never said he couldn't lie. Even if he lied, he wasn't wrong. Listen up, don't tell the boss about today's fight with the pigmen. The boss's words made the goblins look at each other. Boss, you'll be eaten by the boss's boss. Yeah, you'll definitely be eaten. If Goblin lies to me, I'll smash his head. Try it, you little trash. I can take on 2 of you. Try it then. I've put up with you for a long time. For a moment, the forest was full of noise. Great, if the boss is eaten, I'll be the boss. A big goblin shouted excitedly. Looking at the noisy underlings, Goblin's face darkened. Shut up. Goblin roared again. The goblins in the forest quickly shut their mouths. You trash, I'm not dead yet. Faced with the boss's gaze, the goblins shrank their necks. I wasn't planning to deceive the boss. I meant I'll tell him, if you try to compete with me, I'll eat you. The goblins looked at each other. I knew it. The boss wouldn't be that stupid. Yeah, the boss is the boss. He wouldn't be that stupid. Goblin listened proudly to the goblin's chatter. He really was clever. With a little thought, he smoothed things over. Keep eating, eat until you're full. Take the leftovers with you. The goblins' excited shouts echoed again in the dim forest. The goblins rushed towards the meat. There was venison and pigman meat. For a while, the forest was filled with the eerie sound of chewing. North of the Goblin River, in the forest, Throne Tribe, Iron Cave. It was night, and a full moon hung in the sky. The silver moonlight gently dispelled the darkness. Outside the Iron Cave, the forest was silent and still. Only the ding-ding sound from within the Iron Cave echoed through the world. Suddenly, there was a stir deep in the forest. A rustling sound. Something was brushing against the vegetation. Soon, huge figures appeared in the forest. One by one, massive ogres emerged from the forest. Leading them was Benben. He carried a spiked club on his shoulder, and his armor was dented and misshapen. Ah, Benben is back. The goblin guarding the Iron Cave entrance was startled awake by the noise in the forest. He looked closely and shouted excitedly. One goblin even turned and ran into the Iron Cave. In the clearing outside the cave, Benben sat down to rest. The other 20 or so ogres also sat down. They took fruits from the pouches at their waists and began to eat. Soon, Li Ming and Gobugu hurried out of the cave. Benben, you finally decided to come back. Seeing the huge figures outside, Li Ming felt relieved. Although Benben was usually a bit silly, he had a bit of cleverness. Li Ming walked over and slapped Benben's leg. Benben looked down at his boss and whimpered. He turned to look at the ogres behind him. Li Ming followed Benben's gaze to the ogres. Ogre. Level, 82. Strength, 481. Defense, 457. Agility, 176. Body regeneration, LV, 2. Li Ming noticed the ogres were all high level. All above level 80, most above level 90. Benben got stronger. Li Ming realized Benben was bigger than a few months ago. Benben used to be 5 meters tall. Now he was almost 7 meters tall. His armor looked like it was about to burst. The armor could no longer cover Benben's body. Many parts were exposed to the air. The armor wasn't worn, it was hanging on him. Ogre King Elite. Level, 11. Strength, 1314. Defense, 2716. Agility, 1114. Magic, 707. Enhanced Stone Body, LV1. Defense plus 1000. Cannot be devoured. Body Regeneration, LV5. Heart of Stone, LV1. Immune to all negative effects. Requires Enhanced Stone Body prerequisite skill. The sudden surge in the panel's attributes left Li Ming dumbfounded. The Hardened Stone Skin skill not only advanced to Hardened Stone Body, it also gained a powerful skill called Heart of Stone. The ability to be immune to all negative effects made Li Ming drool with envy. With this skill at his side, only a direct confrontation could kill him. No wonder you could bring back so many ogres, Benben. You've gotten stronger. It was clear that in the past few months, Benben had gone back to the mountains to fight. He had become stronger through battles with his own kind. The battered armor was the best proof. Ordinary attacks couldn't cause such damage. Only an ogre's fist could leave such marks. Boss, my armor is broken. I can't wear it anymore. Benben looked down at the armor on his body. He reached out his right hand and poked the chest plate. With that poke, the chest plate immediately fell to the ground. Li Ming grinned, feeling quite pleased. No worries. I'll make you a new one. Let's go inside. Benben got up and stood. He turned and roared a few times at his companions behind him. The ogres all stood up one by one. They followed the boss and the goblins into the Iron Cave. Before long, the outside of the Iron Cave quieted down. Under the moonlight, the forest returned to its previous silence. In the following days, Li Ming focused on one task. That was crafting armor tailored for Benben and his underlings. The daily life of a blacksmith began with Benben's return. From that day on, the clanging sounds of metal in the cave became even louder. It was another new day in the afternoon. In the Iron Cave by the underground riverbank, Li Ming stood by a massive iron anvil on the riverbank. Holding large tongs, he placed the red-hot armor parts. Benben used a specialized giant hammer to pound them repeatedly. The ogres watched curiously from the side. Ogres liked warm environments, so they could withstand high temperatures. Binbin has become so strong, yet can still be killed by humans. Humans really can't be underestimated. Looking at Binbin's massive body, a trace of worry flashed in Li Meng's eyes. The Principality of Illicis was invading the Goblin Forest to expand its territory. The future of human invasion into the Goblin Forest was inevitable. To humans, they were merely developing the wilderness. Eliminating the barbarians was just a trivial task. The future path of conflict with humans was unavoidable. Boss. At this moment, a goblin soldier came running over excitedly. When it saw the massive figures on the riverbank, the shouting Gobichai quickly stopped in its tracks. It looked at the group of ogres on the riverbank with a face full of uncertainty. Could it be that the Iron Cave was invaded by ogres? Where did so many ogres come from? What is it? Seeing Gobichai hesitant to approach, Li Meng asked. The boss's inquiry brought Gobichai back to its senses. It looked fervently at the figure forging by the anvil. The boss was truly amazing. He had recruited so many ogre underlings again. Gobichai was no longer afraid and quickly approached the riverbank. Boss, I encountered the Pigmen tribe in the eastern forest. They attacked us, but we drove them away. Gobichai's report made Li Meng's expression change slightly by the anvil. The turning point predicted by the simulated life had finally appeared. This conflict led to a massive attack by the Pigmen tribe. The Pigmen tribe was probably already preparing to advance westward. Boss, it's not my fault. They ambushed us first. Gobichai shrank its neck, cautiously looking at the boss. How far was the battle site from the Gobadi tribe? The Gobadi tribe was about 20 kilometers west of the Pigmen tribe. Not too close, but not too far either. Gobichai counted on its fingers. About 5 iron caves distance from the tribe. The Iron Cave was about 2 kilometers from the Throne tribe. 5 would be over 10 kilometers. Understand, go ahead. Seeing that the boss didn't punish it, Gobichai grinned. It turned and ran out of the cave excitedly. Listening to the departing footsteps, Li Meng's face showed contemplation. It seemed the Pigmen tribe was expanding westward. Gobu-gu. Li Meng suddenly called out. Gobu-gu, who was cooling down by the water, shivered. It quickly got up and looked at the boss. Boss, I'm here. Start mass-producing goblin armor from today. Due to the constantly changing size of goblins, full-body armor was out of the question, but simple armor could be made to protect vital parts. The iron production in the Iron Cave could now support large-scale goblin armor production. It was time to arm his goblin underlings. With armor protection, even ordinary goblin survival rates would increase several times. In the era of cold weapons, having armor and not having armor were two completely different matters. Gobu-Ge's eyes lit up, and it ran off excitedly. Boss, I got it. Gobu-Gu, who had been forging arrowheads and spearheads every day, was already bored. Finally, it could forge something else. Li Meng looked up at Binbin and grinned. Binbin, speed up. Next month, we'll go trouble the Pigmen tribe. Binbin laughed heartily and hammered even harder. Goblin Northern Forest. In the depths of the endless forest, green was the only color. A tributary split from the Goblin River and extended northward. On the riverbanks, over 20 kilometers away, a tribe had appeared at some point. Wooden buildings stretched across both banks. A large area of the surrounding forest had been cut down, leaving no stumps behind. In the afternoon, the Goblin Forest was bathed in bright sunlight. In the largest wooden house of the tribe, what a bunch of useless fools. Can't even handle a few goblins. An angry roar echoed in the wooden house. In the hall, over a dozen pigmen tribe members dressed in animal skins sat on ground. On the main seat sat a pigmen tribe member nearly 2.5 meters tall, resembling a giant. Its chubby, robust physique was a size larger than the other pigmen tribe members. Facing the chieftain's gaze, all the elders lowered their heads. Chieftain, goblins frequently appear in the western forest. There should be a goblin nest. Nonsense. We've only been here a short while, and we receive reports of goblin sightings almost every few days. The goblins we encountered this time were unusual. They seemed to deliberately avoid us. That's right. Several times goblins turned and ran when they saw our hunting party. But with a pigmen tribe, isn't it normal for goblins to flee when they see us? No, foolish goblins have never been aware of their own strength. That's true. As long as goblins gather together, they would even dare to bite a dragon a few times. The elders in the hall began discussing one after another. As they talked, they seemed to forget about the still angry chieftain. As the elders seemed to ignore him, Pig Dachiang's mouth twitched. "Shut up," he roared, his voice deafening. The pigmen tribe elders in the hall trembled and quickly closed their mouths. "Kill all those damn goblins for me. There must be no goblins in my territory." Faced with the chief's roar, the elders looked at each other in dismay. The pigman sitting at the front raised his hand. "Chief, we need to wait a bit." "No waiting." Pig Dachiang glared angrily. Pig Daji sat up straight, facing the chief's angry gaze without changing his expression. "We must wait, chief. As the tribe's wise one, I can't let you act recklessly." The pigmen in the hall nodded repeatedly. Although the chief was strong, his mind was far inferior to the wise one. Pig Daji stood up. He turned to face the elders and the chief, grinning. "I asked the tribesmen who escaped back. They said the goblins have a long-range weapon that can shoot arrows, giving the weak goblins the ability to fight our hunting teams. The question is, why do goblins have long-range weapons?" Pig Daji smiled confidently, turning to look at the chief on the main seat. Obviously, the long-range weapons in the goblins' hands were seized from humans. Faced with Pig Daji's gaze, Pig Dachiang glared irritably. "Speak quickly, you chatterbox." Pig Daji grinned, unconcerned. Goblins capable of seizing weapons from humans are not simple creatures, so we must not be careless. With that, Pig Daji sat back in his original seat. He looked at the chief on the main seat and slightly bowed his head. "Chief, we need to wait a while. It's not too late to sweep away the goblins after all the tribesmen have migrated to their new home." In the end, isn't the result the same? Pig Dachiang grinned. "All right, then we'll wait." The pigmen tribe elders in the hall looked at each other. Once again, they looked at the wise one with admiration. The wise one was indeed impressive. It all made sense. Goblin Northern Forest. Throne Cave, Iron Cave. Another new day in the afternoon. On the open ground outside the Iron Cave, Li Ming bathed in the scorching sunlight, facing the Iron Cave. Beside him stood a giant iron can. That iron can was Binbin. The armor on Binbin was thicker than before. Its weight reached a terrifying 5 tons. Every part of its body was covered in iron armor. Even the joints were cleverly designed not to hinder movement. The helmet was a huge bucket-like structure. The visor was a 10-centimeter wide slit. Although wide, arrows could easily hit the eyes through the visor. But outside the visor, there was a mesh guard. During battle, it could be lowered to block arrow attacks. Usually, it could be opened for better visibility. All ogre helmets had the same design. Due to the angle difference between the mesh guard and the visor, it effectively blocked sunlight. As long as they didn't look up at the sun, their eyes wouldn't be exposed to sunlight. Time passed quickly, and a month slipped by unnoticed. Today, Li Ming ended his blacksmithing career. "Don't be afraid, come out." Li Ming shouted into the iron cave. Beside him, Binbin also roared into the cave. Under their urging, a huge shadow in the cave entrance moved. An ogre cautiously stepped out. It first extended its hand, exposing its arm to the sunlight. The scorching sunlight on the iron armor didn't make the ogre feel strange. Only then did the ogre carefully walk out of the cave. Exposed to the sunlight, the ogre behaved like a child, looking around, lifting its legs, waving its arms. It looked up, searching for the thing that frightened them. With the things on their bodies, they wouldn't fear the things in the sky anymore. "Don't look at the sun." Seeing the ogre about to look up, Li Ming roared. The loud roar startled Binbin beside him. The ogre that left the cave was also startled. It quickly lowered its head. "Don't look at the sun. Don't look up at the thing you're afraid of, or you'll turn to stone, understand?" Li Ming's words were not only for the ogre outside the cave. They were also for the ogres hiding inside the cave. "All right now, come out." As long as you don't look up at the thing you're afraid of, you won't turn to stone. Now, Li Ming had only one task: to get the ogres used to life under the sun, and to get them used to not looking up, seeing their tribesmen safe in the sunlight. The ogres inside the cave gradually came out. A total of 23, all wearing full body armor. Looking at the massive figures in front of him, Li Ming grinned. Great, time to trouble the pigmen tribe. A battle with humans was inevitable, and Li Ming had no intention of fleeing without a fight. Bin, take them to play. I'm heading back to the tribe. With that, Li Ming turned and hurried toward the direction of the tribe. Watching his master's departing figure, Bin didn't follow. As the leader, it couldn't always follow the boss. It had to look after its tribesmen. The boss was smart, and it was smart too, but its tribesmen were foolish. Without it watching, who knows, when it returned, it might only see a pile of stones. In those months in the deep mountains, it had seen too many ogre stones. It couldn't imagine why its tribesmen were so foolish, knowing they feared the sun, yet hiding in the forest where sunlight couldn't be blocked. Half an hour later, Throne Tribe. Li Ming hurried back to the tribe and returned to the throne cave. What's your name? At the entrance of the throne cave, Li Ming saw a female lizard man. She was sitting at the entrance, lost in thought. Seeing her master return, she quickly stood up. Master, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to block the way. No worries, you're not blocking my way. Li Ming sat down where the female lizard man had been sitting. The female lizard man, standing behind Li Ming, seemed a bit at a loss. She didn't know whether to turn and go back inside or stay still. Why didn't you go to the iron cave with them? Delivering milk to the male lizard men had become a routine for the female lizard men. Li Ming had tacitly accepted this. Letting the male and female lizard men meet wasn't a bad thing. Social intelligent creatures had emotional needs. It was beneficial for the lizardmen's mental and physical health. My name is Hui Sha. I didn't. Do lizardmen blush? At least Li Ming couldn't tell. Li Ming glanced back at Hui Sha's belly. Seeing her master looking at her belly, a hint of panic flashed in Hui Sha's eyes. Grinning, Li Ming said no more. Boss. Soon, the sound of hooves thundered through the tribe. Goblin came panting, riding a wild boar. The sprinting boar came to a sudden halt, skidding several meters before stopping. Goblin quickly jumped off the boar's back and ran over. Boss, you called for me? Goblin slid to his knees, skidding several meters before kneeling at Li Ming's feet. How's the use of the lance coming along? Li Ming had been pondering how to effectively utilize the Goblin Boar cavalry. From the initial crossbow cavalry approach to the current lance cavalry, the equipped weapons had undergone multiple tests. Crossbows and javelins were suitable for hunting large creatures. The crossbow could attack from a distance, while the javelin could be thrown at short range. With the added speed, the javelin's power was immense. But considering the primary role of cavalry was to charge into formations, equipping a lance became very important. Thus, Li Ming designed a lance specifically for goblins. The spearhead was designed with a cylindrical short spear structure. The tip was very short, less than 10 centimeters. Behind the spearhead was a cylindrical structure. This effectively prevented the lance from penetrating too deeply and getting stuck. The target hit would be knocked away rather than pierced through. This also prevented the lance from becoming a one-time use weapon. Between crossbow cavalry and lance cavalry, Li Ming chose to have both. He simply divided the Goblin Boar cavalry into two main categories. One category was the big Goblin Boar cavalry, an all-rounder type, equipped with a crossbow, javelin, lance, and long knife. The boar's back had enough space to carry all four weapons. Even the lance had a good placement position. One end was placed on the boar's tusk, the other hung on a hook on the leg. When needed, the lance could be easily picked up, very convenient. Only big goblins had enough strength to use the lance. The second category was the Goblin Boar cavalry. The cavalry were just ordinary goblins, not equipped with lances, only with crossbows, javelins, and long knives. They were a long-range and support type of cavalry, responsible for assisting in the charge behind the big Goblin Boar cavalry. Gobu smiled sheepishly and nodded. I can hit the wooden dummy now, but boss, the impact of the lance is too strong. My arm hurts a lot. Hurting is a good sign. Practice more and it won't hurt. Li Ming was very attentive to the development of the Goblin Boar Cavalry. Therefore, he had strict requirements for the Goblin Boar Cavalry. Those who became cavalry were the best among ordinary goblins. Timid goblins would be eliminated before they grew up. From a young age, goblins would start learning to use various weapons. They would also purposefully train their arm strength. Logically, Li Ming's descendants were the best candidates for cavalry. Only strong power could better wield the lance. But the transition period for Li Ming's descendants from goblins to goblin soldiers was too short, less than a year. Once evolved into goblin soldiers, they were no longer suitable for riding boars. For goblin soldiers, the boar size seemed a bit small. Gobichang pulled a long face. Boss, I'll make sure the little brothers practice more. Riding boars was fun, but practicing with a lance was too tiring. Very well, gather your boar cavalry. You will soon face your first battle. Gobichang was momentarily stunned. Then his face lit up with joy. Great, boss. Are we going to fight the lizard men? Last time, he didn't go to the northern swamp with the boss, and Gobichang had always been concerned about it. Today, he could finally fight alongside the boss. The lizard men in the northern swamp are our allies. This time the target is the pigmen tribe in the eastern forest. Gobichang nodded vigorously. He didn't care who the enemy was. As long as he could fight alongside the boss, that was enough. Gobichang quickly got up and scampered over to the boar. He mounted the boar again. Boss, I'll go gather the little brothers right away. Gobichang tugged the reins, and the boar turned around on the spot, panting as it ran into the depths of the forest. Gobichang's little brothers weren't all in the tribe. Most were out hunting. Each hunting party was generally responsible for its own food supply. They were responsible for the food of their own bloodline descendants. Each hunting party handed over a portion of their catch to support the goblins staying in the tribe. In the following days, Li Ming focused on one thing. That was selecting hunting parties to form an army to advance on the pigmen tribe. Half a month later, in the afternoon, the throne cave was bustling with noise. Inside a wooden hut, a group of upper goblins stood around a sand table. Among the goblins, goblin soldiers made up the majority. They stood closest to Li Ming, while the big goblins stood the farthest away. Our target is here. In front of the sand table, Li Ming pointed with a stick to the location of the pigmen tribe. This is a pigmen tribe with a population of about 3,000. The existence of this pigmen tribe has severely threatened our safety, so we must eliminate them. The goblins by the sand table looked excited, their eyes greedily fixed on the spot the boss pointed to with his stick. Boss, I've never eaten pigmen before. Is it tasty? A goblin soldier looked at the boss expectantly. With this question, all the goblins turned to look at the boss. Facing the eager eyes of his goblin followers, Li Ming grinned. I haven't either, but you'll all get to taste it soon. The upper goblins by the sand table nodded vigorously, drool almost dripping from their mouths. I've eaten it. Pigmen meat is so fatty. One bite and it's all oil. It's delicious. Gobichai raised his hand, drooling. He seemed to savor the memory of pigmen meat. The upper goblins beside him were itching at Gobichai's words. Drool couldn't help but trickle from their mouths. Ahem, now listen to me. Li Ming tapped the floor with his stick, pulling the goblins' thoughts back. Remember the location well. If you get separated, you can head there on your own. The pigmen tribe is about 20 kilometers northeast of the Gobadi tribe. You can follow this tributary to reach the pigmen tribe. Although the chances of goblins getting lost in the forest were almost zero, because goblins had a keen sense of smell. They could find the main force by scent. But there were always exceptions. It's always better to be prepared. From today, you need to prepare at least half a month's worth of dry rations. And take your little brothers to the Iron Cave to receive equipment. Half a month to prepare. In half a month, the army sets out. Standing up straight, Li Ming tossed aside the stick in his hand. His gaze swept over the goblins by the sand table, waving his hand. Go, make the preparations. In an instant, The wooden hut was bustling with noise. The upper goblins by the sand table all headed out. The goblins leaving the throne cave scattered in all directions. In no time, they disappeared into the depths of the forest. Standing at the doorway, Li Ming watched as the goblin underlings departed. This expedition to the pigmen tribe could be considered a long-distance training exercise. It was important for the goblins to habitually stockpile provisions for emergencies. The drawbacks of hunting while traveling were too significant to ignore. Thus, over the next half-month, the tribe began preparations for the expedition to the pigmen tribe. Outside the Iron Cave, it was bustling with activity. A large number of goblins lined up to receive armor. The hunting parties also started producing a large amount of jerky. Li Ming didn't stay in the tribe. He headed to the eastern shore outpost of the northern swamp. Morning at the eastern shore outpost of the northern swamp. Not bad at all. Walking through the outpost, Li Ming looked around, nodding repeatedly. Indeed, it was quite good, not much different from his plans. The outpost was built by the water, covering an area about the size of 5 football fields. It was surrounded by a wooden wall nearly 7 meters high. There were 5 watchtowers distributed in 4 directions. Each watchtower was equipped with a 3-bow ballista. The outpost could accommodate around 500 goblins for battle. The outpost had a west gate, and outside the west gate was a simple dock. Gobu Gao grinned at the boss's praise. Boss. At this moment, a goblin came running over excitedly. Boss, the lizard men have brought fish. Li Ming's eyes lit up with interest. Let's go and take a look. Li Ming then climbed the watchtower on the left side of the west gate with Gobu Gao. From the watchtower, Li Ming saw the dock outside. The dock was built by the water. Half of it was in the water and half on the shore. The dock was located in a relatively deep water area. Not far from the dock, a group of lizard men was approaching. Accompanying them were more than a dozen wooden boats. The boats varied in size, with the largest being several times the size of the smallest. These boats were also made by goblins for the lizard men as transport tools. They were pushing the boats towards the dock. The contents of the boats seemed heavy. The gunnels were almost level with the water surface. Fortunately, the water in the swamp was calm. If it were the Goblin River, the boats would have sunk long ago. Boss, those lizard men always like to deliver fish in the afternoon, and by the time they're sent to the tribe overnight, it's almost morning. As the boats approached, Li Ming finally saw what was inside them. It was water with a slightly rippling surface. Faintly visible were fish of various sizes swimming inside the boats. As the lizardmen's team reached the dock, the outpost became lively. With a creaking sound, the west gate slowly opened. A large number of goblins rushed out with a dozen carts. Nearly 100 goblins on the dock, along with the lizard men, skillfully transferred the catch. Boss, why not have the lizard men make the fish in a jerky? It would be much more convenient. Gobu Gao looked at the boss with a puzzled expression. Jerky might not taste great, but it could fill the stomach. Transporting live fish for the lizard men was indeed troublesome. It was time-consuming, and each transfer took a long time. Jerky can be used for emergencies, but it can't be consumed long-term. The boss's answer made Gobu Gao nod in partial understanding. They were the same. Eating jerky every day would be unbearable. After inspecting the outpost, Li Ming didn't linger. He left early the next morning. By the time Li Ming returned to the tribe, it was already the afternoon of the next day. Back in the tribe, Li Ming stayed put and didn't go anywhere. Time passed day by day. Half a month later, at the Throne Tribe, another new day in the morning. The buffer zone outside the east wall was bustling. Nearly 5,000 goblins spread across a vast wasteland. The green figures formed a dense mass, almost endless. Just witnessing the scene was enough to make one's scalp tingle. The goblins' chaotic cries echoed through the sky. The gathering made the goblins unusually excited. They looked around, occasionally shouting, "Boss, the boss is here." At this moment, a shout came from the dense mass of goblins. On the watchtower to the left of the east gate, Li Ming's strong figure appeared. The boss's appearance caused the goblins outside to erupt in excitement. Standing on the watchtower, Li Meng looked at the sea of people before him with a pleased expression. In less than 2 years, he had achieved this level of success. He basked in the fervent gazes of thousands of goblins. Facing countless eyes, Li Meng spread his arms wide. This gesture instantly silenced the goblins outside the wall. "Tell me, what are we?" Li Meng roared, his voice deafening. "Goblins, goblins!" The goblins outside the wall raised their weapons high, shouting loudly. The momentum was overwhelming, wave after wave. The tremendous noise startled birds and beasts in the surrounding forest. Li Meng grinned, pressing his hands downward. The thunderous shouts abruptly ceased. "We are goblins, and thus we have many enemies. Our battles will never end. We may be weak, but we will become stronger. We will show our enemies that the era of goblins has arrived, and goblins will rise." Li Meng's voice resonated powerfully through the heavens and earth. The sound was so loud, every goblin heard the ambition in the boss's voice. All the goblins looked fervently at the figure on the watchtower. Under the boss's leadership, they would surely defeat any formidable enemy. Goblin, Goblin. Suddenly, a shout arose from the dense mass of goblins. This shout was echoed by all the goblins. The goblin army outside the wall erupted once more. They shouted the boss's name with even greater fervor. Goblin, Goblin. The momentum was immense, wave after wave. All the goblins raised their weapons, shouting passionately. Even the boars of the goblin boar cavalry were infected by the fervent atmosphere. They grunted excitedly. Li Meng waved his hand, pointing eastward. The fervent shouts instantly ceased. "Our enemies are to the east. Forward march!" The goblin army in the wasteland outside the wall responded and moved. The goblins in simple armor turned and surged into the forest. For a moment, the wasteland outside the tribe rumbled with footsteps. The dense mass of goblins surged eastward like a tide. The dense forest seemed like a devouring beast, continuously swallowing the goblins. Goblin boar cavalry move out. Riding on a boar, Gobichong let out an excited roar. Nearly 1,000 goblin boar cavalry moved in unison, charging into the forest. The thunderous sound of hooves echoed through the heavens and earth. Nearly 1,000 goblin boar cavalry charged into the dense forest like a dark cloud. Seeing this scene, Li Meng grinned. He suddenly leaped down from the watchtower. His strong body landed steadily on Binbin's shoulder outside the wall from a height of over. Outside the wooden wall, 24 ogres stood at the base. They lined up in a row. Each ogre was clad in full armor, wielding a massive spike club. Roar! The impact on his shoulder made Binbin let out a roar. With massive strides, his enormous body began to run. The other ogres followed closely, charging into the forest. The ogres running appeared somewhat clumsy, but their speed was incredibly fast. In no time, they caught up with the main force that hadn't fully entered the forest. Faced with the charging ogres, the goblins quickly made way. The dense crowd of goblins opened paths for the ogres to pass through. The 24 ogres rushed into the forest like heavy tanks. It took over half an hour for the wasteland outside the eastern wall to quiet down. The once crowded goblin army had vanished. Only the deep forest remained noisy. The noise gradually faded away. Northern forest by the Goblin River. It was already afternoon, and the forest was silent. "Boss, I smell pigs. They've been here." In the dim depths of the forest, a group of goblins gathered together. One goblin stood out as the tallest, standing about 2.5 meters tall with a massive frame. In front of it, the surrounding goblins looked like little rabbits. Gobu D surveyed the depths of the forest around him. "Tell the little bosses to spread out with their underlings. If they find the pigmen tribe, kill them." Gobu D grinned, a glint of greed in his eyes. Compared to wild boar, the meat of the pigmen tribe was tastier, fat and tender, extremely delicious. "Boss, why not take a peek at the pigmen tribe's settlement?" Gobu D kicked the goblin who suggested it flying. "Idiot, trying to get yourself killed?" The kicked goblin quickly scrambled up from the ground. It smiled obsequiously and scurried to the boss's side. Boss, what does the boss's boss want us to do? Goblin glared at the little goblin. It grinned menacingly, a glint of greed in its eyes. The boss wants us to roam the nearby forest. If we encounter the pigmen tribe, kill them. The goblin grinned. Boss, that's right. The boss's boss wants us to kill the pigmen tribe. Wouldn't it be better to attack their settlement? Goblin looked at the little goblin like it was an idiot. It kicked the little goblin flying again. Idiot, trying to get yourself killed? I'm not as stupid as you. The boss only wanted it to hunt the pigmen tribe in the forest. It didn't order an attack on the pigmen tribe settlement. Boss, it's the pigmen tribe. At that moment, a goblin came running over. A lot of pigmen tribe. They're over there. The goblin pointed to the depths of the forest in the northeast in front of Goblin. How many is a lot? Goblin glanced at the forest depths in the northeast. Well, the goblin began counting on its fingers. Finally, its eyes lit up and it extended both hands to the boss. Boss, more than 10 fingers. 10 fingers? Goblin scratched its head, looking confused. I know it's 10. A goblin jumped out, looking smug. No, 10 of 10 is 2 tens. That's 20. No, it's not 20. It's definitely 20. The goblins around Goblin started arguing loudly. They argued until they were red in the face, glaring at each other. The argument among the underlings made Goblin very annoyed. Shut up, it roared, stopping the underlings from continuing their argument. The surrounding goblins quickly shut their mouths. Facing the boss's fierce gaze, the goblins shrank their necks. Goblin pointed at the goblin who reported the pigmen tribe's appearance. Are there more of them than us? The goblin quickly shook its head. It started counting on its fingers again. Stop counting, as long as there aren't more of them than us. Goblin glared at the finger-counting little goblin. It pulled the war horn from its waist, put it to its mouth, and blew it. The forest was immediately filled with the long, drawn-out sound of the horn. The sound swept through the depths of the forest. Goblins scattered everywhere heard the horn almost simultaneously. They all turned and ran towards the source of the horn. The boss was calling them. Meanwhile, in the depths of the forest, not far to the northeast, silhouettes moved in the dim forest. Over 100 pigmen tribe members were walking through the forest. The appearance of the horn sound made all the pigmen tribe members stop. They looked up in the direction of the horn sound. It's the goblins. Listening to the horn sound echoing in the forest, Pig Intestine grinned. Recently, goblins had been frequently appearing in the western forest. The hunting team had also frequently encountered attacks. Under the chief's orders, it led the team to clear out those pesky goblins in the forest. Everyone, follow me quickly. Pig Intestine let out an excited roar. Holding a large machete, its plump body charged into the depths of the forest. The other pigmen warriors quickly followed. Their chubby bodies jiggled as they ran. For a moment, the forest was filled with the oink, oink sounds of pigs. That wasn't pig sounds, but the panting of the pigmen tribe as they ran. Half an hour later, in the depths of the dim forest. Not good, not good. Boss, the pigmen tribe is charging over here. A goblin came running from the depths of the forest. What are you afraid of? We'll charge too. Goblin slapped the panicked underling flying. By now, over 300 goblins had gathered around Goblin. Little ones, follow me, waha. Goblin laughed loudly and let out a roar. With a massive body and a spiked club in hand, it charged into the depths of the forest. Wah wah. The other goblins, seeing the boss's bravery, excitedly shouted, wah wah, and followed behind the boss. In no time, less than 10 minutes later, the two sides met in a relatively flat part of the forest. It's the goblins. It's meat. Both sides almost simultaneously noticed each other's presence. Kill them. Eat them. Goblin grinned menacingly, letting out a loud shout. Not far away, Pig Intestine also let out a roar. The excited goblins looked greedily at the big, plump pigmen tribe members. Whoosh! The crossbowmen goblins launched the first attack. They pulled the triggers, shooting out bolts. Bolts flew towards the pigmen tribe in the forest. The sound of the bolts cutting through the air made the pigmen tribe quickly shield their heads. A series of screams echoed. Several pigmen were struck by bolts. The bolts embedded themselves into their plump bodies. Though they penetrated deeply, they didn't inflict fatal damage on the pigmen. Their layers of fat effectively protected their fragile organs. The pain only made the pigmen more furious. With bloodshot eyes, they charged at the goblins. Ha 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 die! Goblin, with his massive frame, was like a heavy tank. The moment he saw the pigmen, he launched into a charge. His running body was like a mountain of flesh bearing down on the pigmen. Two pigmen fearlessly rushed to meet him head-on. Goblin grinned menacingly and swung his spiked club down on one of the pigmen. "Stand back. Let me handle this." At that moment, a powerful shout rang out. A stronger pigman dashed past the two pigmen. He charged forward, swinging his large machete to intercept the descending spiked club. Clang! A piercing metallic clash resounded through the forest. The spiked club and the large machete collided. Sparks flew as both combatants took 2 steps back. The impact from a spiked club made Goblin's hand tremble. Pig Intestine fared no better. His right hand, holding the large machete, was shaking. Again, Goblin grinned fiercely. He charged forward once more, swinging his spiked club. Pig Intestine was not to be outdone, charging to meet him. The two continued to clash their weapons together. Once, twice, 3 times, the speed of their weapon swings increased. They constantly shifted their footing, changing their positions. Each sought a flaw in the other's attack. Their weapons swung faster and faster. A gust of wind seemed to form around them. Anyone nearby could feel the force. As the leaders clashed fiercely, the goblins and pigmen were also locked in battle. The dim forest was filled with noise. The goblins' wah-wah cries mingled with the pigmen's roars. The pigmen warriors were indeed strong. Even with the goblins' powerful crossbows, they couldn't gain an overwhelming advantage. Despite outnumbering the pigmen several times over, they couldn't quickly end the fight. In the dim forest, a bloody battle raged on. Each pigman faced the onslaught of several goblins. They had to be wary of the occasional whistling bolt. Many pigmen were pierced by the goblins' long spears, their flesh torn, yet they did not fall. Their large machetes were stained with goblin blood. Any goblin struck by a pigman's machete was almost certainly killed instantly. But as more goblins arrived from all directions to support the fight, the pigmen gradually fell into a disadvantage. "Damned green-skinned trash, get out of my way." On the chaotic battlefield, a pigman roared in anger. It suddenly stepped forward, slashing a goblin across the shoulder. "Ah!" A goblin screamed. Most of its body was torn apart. It fell to the ground, dead. The death of their comrade did not frighten the surrounding goblins. They charged forward, shouting. Their long spears thrust forcefully into the pigman's body. The spearheads embedded almost halfway in. The pigman let out a scream, stumbled, and fell heavily to the ground, unable to rise again. Looking at its body, bloodied holes were scattered all over. Clang! At that moment, a piercing metallic clash rang out. The leaders locked in battle had reached a conclusion. A large machete flew through the air. It flew over 10 meters before embedding with a thud into a tree. "Die!" Goblin shouted excitedly. He swung his spiked club down on Pig Intestine's head. If it hit, Pig Intestine's skull would surely be crushed. "Elder!" At that moment, a pigman suddenly rushed over. It leaped, knocking Pig Intestine aside. It took the blow from the spiked club with its own body. Thud! The massive spiked club smashed heavily into the pigman's head. The pigman's head burst like a shattered watermelon. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. The shattered head, along with the body, was slammed into the ground by the spiked club. "Damn goblin!" The sight made Pig Intestine's eyes widen in rage. "Elder, retreat, retreat!" 2 pigmen rushed forward, dragging Pig Intestine forcibly toward the depths of the forest. "Retreat, retreat!" Reluctantly, Pig Intestine gave the order to withdraw. He blew the whistle hanging around his neck. Beep, beep. The sharp whistle suddenly echoed through the forest. Hearing the whistle, the pigmen snapped out of their battle frenzy. They abandoned their opponents and, covered in blood, rushed toward the depths of the forest. Wah wah! The fleeing pigmen elicited excited shouts from the goblins. They eagerly pursued them, but before long, the pigmen vanished without a trace. Although the goblins could smell the lingering scent of the pigmen, they knew the pigmen's tribe was not far away. Pursuing further would only draw more pigmen to them. Boss, they've run off. As the pigmen retreated, the dim forest fell silent. Goblin gnawed contentedly on a pig's head. A large piece of chewy skin was torn off. Seeing their boss eat with such relish, the goblins' throats moved. Let them run, clean up the battlefield, eat and drink as you please. The surrounding goblins' eyes lit up. They shouted excitedly and pounced on the corpses strewn about. The goblins returning from the chase saw their comrades already feasting. They cursed and joined the eating frenzy. For a moment, the dim forest was filled with eerie wailing and chewing sounds. Pigmen tribe. In the afternoon, inside the largest wooden house. I can't stand it, damn goblins. I want to tear them apart and make soup. A frenzied roar echoed inside the wooden house. Pig Da Qiang, sitting at the head, glared at Pig Daji, panting heavily. Those disgusting goblins have reached our doorstep. Pig Daji, do you still want me to wait and do nothing? Pig Da Qiang glared angrily, his fists clenched. He had made up his mind. If Pig Daji dared to spout nonsense again, he would use his fist to show Pig Daji who the real chieftain was. Facing the chieftain's angry gaze, Pig Daji grinned. Then we won't wait. Let's clear out the goblins in the surrounding forest first. Seeing Pig Daji agree so easily, Pig Da Qiang was momentarily stunned. Pig Daji's easy agreement left Pig Da Qiang a bit unaccustomed. Chieftain, we can fight, but we mustn't venture too deep into the forest. Our forces are limited, and we can't rashly advance westward. Pig Da Qiang rubbed his bald head. He looked at Pig Daji with some confusion. Sage, what are you afraid of? Shoot them dead for me. A new addition appeared on the bowstring of the three-bow ballista, a quiver made of logs. The quiver had 72 holes, each capable of holding a half-meter-long bolt. Once fired, all 72 bolts would be unleashed. Although lacking precision, they spread widely, perfect for dealing with dense groups of minor enemies. The giant bolts were powerful, but only suitable for individual targets. The quiver was ideal for attacking cluster targets. Fire, kill them. Goblin grinned menacingly and pulled the trigger. With a loud thud, the massive bowstring snapped back on the watchtower. 72 bolts shot out from the quiver. They spread across the sky, arcing slightly as they charged toward the pigmen tribe advancing on the wasteland. Almost simultaneously, the sound of bowstrings snapping echoed from other watchtowers. A dense shower of bolts rained down like droplets, covering a vast area of the pigmen tribe. Ah! Screams echoed, accompanied by the sound of bolts piercing flesh. A large swath of the pigmen tribe fell under the arrow rain. Some of them ended up looking like porcupines. Their bodies were riddled with densely packed bolts. What kind of weapon is this? Pig Daji, observing from the forest, was startled. When the dark cloud of arrows descended, he sensed trouble. In just one encounter, dozens of his kin were killed. The terrifying weapon gave Pig Daji a bad feeling. Wow, reload quickly. Seeing his shot bring down a large group of pigmen, Goblin was ecstatic. He hurriedly urged his goblin underlings to replace the quiver. The goblin underlings quickly carried a quiver filled with bolts and placed it on the bowstring. Damn goblins! Pig Da Qiang, charging on the wasteland, was also taken aback by the sudden attack. There were simply too many arrows in the sky. He was hit by a few bolts himself. Fortunately, his thick skin and flesh protected him from any real harm. It only hurt a bit, as the bolts were stuck in his fat layer. I'll kill you all. Pig Da Qiang suddenly halted mid-run. He raised his right foot and stomped heavily on the ground. War stomp. He roared, as if chanting a spell to the heavens and earth. The ground beneath him suddenly cracked and rapidly spread toward the wooden fortress. Damn, it's magic! Goblin, watching from the watchtower, saw this scene unfold. His previous shot was aimed at the largest pigman. Seeing a massive crack spreading from its feet, Gobudi's expression changed dramatically. The crack was heading straight for his watchtower. Before the goblin underlings could finish replacing the quiver, Gobudi leaped to the left. His tall body jumped off the watchtower. With a thud, he landed against the wooden wall. On the wasteland, the crack spanned 200 meters in the blink of an eye and struck the watchtower. Boom! A thunderous crash echoed. That section of the wooden wall, along with the watchtower, collapsed with a roar. The rumbling continued for a while. The collapsed wall and structures filled the crack. This created a massive breach in the attacked section of the wooden wall. Ha! Warriors, charge! Kill the goblins, leave none alive. Pig Daqiang laughed heartily. He raised his large machete and charged again. The other pigmen, seeing the wall breached by their chieftain, were invigorated. Roar! They roared and continued their charge, braving the arrow rain. In the blink of an eye, the pigmen were within 100 meters of the wooden wall. What are you waiting for? Shoot them dead. Gobudi picked up his spike club from the ground. He roared at the goblin underlings on the wooden wall who were in a daze. The goblin crossbowmen quickly pulled the triggers. In an instant, the sound of bowstrings snapping echoed from the wooden wall. An even denser rain of arrows fell upon the pigmen. The charging pigmen shielded their heads with their hands and continued their advance through the arrow rain. But as the arrows pierced their bodies, they let out cries of pain. Yet the pigmen displayed immense bravery. Even with their arms full of arrows and blood flowing, they did not halt their charge. The fall of their comrades did not instill fear in them. Instead, they fought with increasing ferocity, their eyes turning red. From the sky, the pigmen on the wasteland looked like a dark cloud surging toward the breach in the wooden wall. And standing at the breach was a tall, green-skinned figure. It was Gobudi. He stood straight, holding a spike club. Facing the approaching pigmen outside the wooden wall, there was no trace of fear in his eyes. Behind him were goblins, shouting excitedly. They held long spears, their eyes filled only with excitement. With their leader standing at the forefront, they were fearless. Goblins, prepare to die. Pig Daqiang was the first to charge into the breach. He grinned menacingly, wielding his large machete as he charged at Gobudi. Pigmen, I'll eat you. Gobudi grinned back, fearlessly meeting the charge. At the breach in the wooden wall, the two massive figures collided. The large machete clashed with the spike club, sparks flying. Blow after blow, a battle of sheer force. Get out of the way. A pigman tried to join the fight between the two. Gobudi stepped back and swung his massive spike club at the pigman's head. The pigman tried to slash the spiked club with his machete, but the large machete was deflected by the spike club. The spike club continued its trajectory and smashed into the pigman's head. The large pig head exploded, brain matter splattering everywhere. The chubby body collapsed to the ground. Goblin, you're courting death. The death of his kin enraged Pig Daqiang. He lifted his right foot, but then put it down again. If he used War Stomp, now, they wouldn't be able to get through. The massive crack caused by the War Stomp would form a natural barrier. Reaching the breach in the wooden wall, Pig Daqiang realized how thick the goblins had built it. If they tried to cut through it with weapons, who knew how long it would take? Pig Daqiang had no choice but to continue fighting the goblins. Both sides were powerhouses, unable to gain the upper hand in a short time. One side attacked, the other defended, using their weapons to block each other's blows. One side attacked, the other defended. Don't worry about me. Charge in. In the midst of battle, Pig Daqiang roared. He wasn't a fool. He knew his kin couldn't stay outside. Those left outside would become targets for the goblins on the wooden wall. Charge, kill them. The chieftain's shout snapped the pigmen back to reality. They rushed past the two combatants and charged into the wooden fortress. Wow. The goblins inside the fortress were not to be outdone and charged forward. At the breach, the pigmen and goblins clashed. But the moment they collided, the goblins fell into a disadvantage.